I'm about to teach you everything that I know about YouTube. And to help me, I brought in 7 of the top YouTube experts and strategists who have collectively been responsible for billions of views. Together, we've combined 83 years of YouTube experience. And today, we're sharing it all with you.
Those are the areas where I see retention problems.
It is the one thing you need to learn how to do.
Actually really think through what you make and don't just make.
If you watch this video from start to finish, you'll learn everything that you need to know to start, grow, and scale a YouTube channel. And because this is YouTube, and I want to make this video as tangible as humanly possible for you, I've broken it all into a conveniently numbered list. We'll cover the fundamentals of what you need to grow on YouTube first, and then get into the specifics of exactly what goes into making a killer YouTube video, before rounding it off with more advanced topics like analytics, algorithm, flops, and so much more. By the end of this video, you'll know everything that's taken us collectively 83 years to learn, and I promise you, you will be changed. So let's jump straight into it with part 1, how to grow on YouTube. By far the most common question I get is, what's your best advice for growing on YouTube? And to help me answer this question, I brought in the most sought after YouTube strategist in the world, Patty Galloway. Patty has worked with clients like Mr. Beast, Ryan Trahan, Jesser, and Noah Kagan. But today, he's here to help you. And because the concept of growing on YouTube is quite broad and the advice changes depending on where you're at in your journey, I've broken it into 4 main stages. Your first 1,000 subscribers, 1K to 10K subscribers, 10K to 100K subscribers, and 100K to 1 million subscribers and beyond. How do you get your first 1,000 subscribers?
Yeah, it'll sound kind of contradictory, but I don't really think about growth at that size. I just think about getting repetition in and really solidifying the kind of channel we want to be, like the niche we're actually occupying. Because I think if you get too caught up in like the world of YouTube strategy when you have 100 subscribers, you're going to start jumping around on trends, like trying to, study what this outlier video did here, and you get too caught up in your own head, and you're probably not at the level where you can actually produce really good content. So at that size, like my biggest focus is, I call it it's just like the triple Venn diagram of picking a niche. So look at what you love, what you're good at, and what people demand. And I know that sounds very simple, but quite often like people will just do what they love, and maybe that's not something they have like unique advantage in. Or maybe they'll do something that they're good at, but they hate it and then they can't stick with it. And then oftentimes, it's a little rarer, but sometimes people love and are good at a thing that nobody cares about. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but that does happen. So in a case like that, you don't have that tick. You don't have that part of the Venn diagram satisfied. So I try to just get people to actually imagine like a triple Venn diagram, like what is the middle of those 3 things for you? And can you pick that as your niche to start? And then the analogy I always use, someone explained this to me, like an actual business mentor explained this to me, but this idea of like, imagine you go to a sushi restaurant and then the sushi restaurant is also serving burgers. You're probably going to think, okay, that's not probably a very good sushi restaurant, because the best sushi restaurants, they just do sushi. And I think the same is true for a YouTube channel, and too early in the journey, people try to just experiment with all these different things, jump around in these different areas, and some of it's natural, and it's not the end of the world if you do that, but I always like to have this like sushi restaurant mentality of we make sushi. So whatever our niche is, we're doing that, and we're only doing that, and we're going to get good at that. So in those beginning stages, I say get your niche right, really focus down on that niche, and then before getting too caught up in like strategy and like growth hacks and tactics to gain subscribers, just think about, can we post 2 or 3 videos a week? Which sounds like a lot, and anyone that knows me well knows that like a big part of my approach is always like getting to a place of quality, so we don't need quantity. But it's a cliche, but you need that quantity to get that quality. So I like posting sort of 2 or 3 videos a week until we have maybe 30, 40 videos under our belt, and then that just gives us a good foundation to actually get good at YouTube. And it's like the same as anything. Like, I'm training for a new sport right now, and like my coach, he's just drilling the fundamentals really well. So like the fundamentals for YouTube are editing. Like I want to drill editing into someone. You need volume to get good at editing. So being able to edit, being able to make thumbnails. Like you can't just like make 3 videos and your 4th video is a perfect thumbnail. It takes time.
How do you grow from 1K to 10K subscribers?
I think at that point, because we have, let's say, 50 videos under our belt, we've been making content, we've been making 2 or 3 videos a week, so probably been making content for like 20, 25 weeks, right? At that point, and you, like you said, there's some traction. At that point, you start to see some trends emerge on the channel. So you can see, okay, like this video got 1,000 views, but video got 100 views. This video did 2,000 views. This video did 300 views. And you can start to see the emergence of like your top 5 or 10% videos and your bottom 5 or 10% videos. And really, like, the key is just trying to eliminate more and more of those weaker performers over time, even if some of them are things you enjoy doing. And this is always like the kind of internal battle of YouTube strategy versus creative expression. And I think there's this beautiful analogy which I like, and I believe I heard it on a podcast a while ago, but it's like you have artists and you've got distributors. An artist is someone who just follows their passion and they just do what they want. A distributor is just someone who tries to distribute their content to as many people as possible. So they don't care if they like it or not. They don't care if they find it boring. They just want views. And I think the best balance is being somewhere in the middle. So you're still like an artist, you're still a creative, but you still have that like distributor mindset. I think it's a little bit immature when people are like, why should you even have to think about strategy? Why should you even have to think about this stuff? Like, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be just your passion. I'm like, if you want it to be just a hobby, that's fine. But if you want to like take this seriously and grow a channel, you do need some balance of strategy. So I think looking at what videos are doing better at that stage is a really good idea. Starting to actually make more videos like those top 10% of videos. And then I think the biggest theme difference between, let's say, 0 to 1K and 1K to like 10K or to 100K and beyond is ideation becomes a bigger factor. So in that earlier stage, I was just saying, it doesn't really matter, just make what you want, like, you know, stick to your niche, but like just have fun, whatever calls to you. Now things get a bit more serious, and we have to look at what's working for us, but then also start to study other niches, start to study outlier ideas on other channels that are similar to yours and see how you can adapt and take inspiration from those ideas. And I think the biggest thing is if your schedule is 40 hours a week of YouTube, which I know isn't realistic because not everyone's full time, but for the sake of the example, if your schedule is 40 hours a week, maybe in that 0 to 1K mark, you're spending just an hour or two a week on ideation. At the 1K to 10K and beyond, I want you to spend 5-10 hours a week on ideation and actually really think through what you make and don't just make. And I think that's a big difference.
At this point, does that quality versus quantity trade-off start to shift?
When you've posted 50 videos, I think that's when you can kind of take a bit of a deeper look at your quantity of like what you're posting. And I think quite often I recommend just one a week at that point. Like I always say with this stuff, there's always exceptions. Like I have a friend, James Janney, and he started his channel and posted like a video every month, and now he posts like a video every year, and he does great. And he probably hasn't even posted 50 videos. He probably posted like 20 videos. So like there's exceptions to this, but generally I think it's a good idea to just get that frequency, and then when you get to 50, that's when you can kind of build your own schedule a bit better. I still do like the idea of posting one a week because you're still learning, you're still building foundations. So I think one a week, so going from 2 or 3 a week to one a week is a good place where you can start to increase that quality a little bit. It is a mistake sometimes I see where people go from posting a lot of videos to then suddenly saying, oh, I want to just focus on quality, and they're spending like a month on a video because you probably don't have enough traction to justify that quite yet. And I think that's important. So I would probably change it to about one a week after that point for most people.
How do you grow from 10K to 100K subscribers?
I think at that point, like the biggest difference is like we still want those same fundamentals of like continuing to improve video to video, but at that point the biggest thing I would say is different. And not everyone likes to hear me say this, but I can't even tell you how many channels I've either done myself or with other people from that 10K to 100K mark. It's a lot of different channels. What I've seen is quite often just a channel building their strategy around a format. Sometimes just one format, sometimes 2 or 3 formats, or people can call them buckets as well. So you've posted quite a few videos, you've spent more time on ideation in all these different stages we've talked about. Now you probably have very clear outliers on the channel. Now an outlier for some people could be 1 million views, for other people could be just 10K when everything else gets 500 views. So like it doesn't really necessarily matter, it's just more about how many times the average is that video. So a video that's, let's say, 5 or 10 times your average, I would call that an outlier. Can those videos, if you can see a theme of which videos are jumping out, can those videos actually become our strategy? So can we actually end up making the bulk of our future videos around maybe 1 to 3 formats that are working really well? And actually just today I broke it down in a tweet thread where I broke down a channel that we've been helping, which was called Golden Kobe Family. It's a channel about a golden retriever, and they found this one format that worked really well, which was their golden retriever reacting to a puppy. And they were like, okay, well, we can't get a new puppy every week, because that would be just unethical and ridiculous. But we can have a situation where we have our golden retriever react to other people's dogs, or we can bring it to the zoo and it can react to animals, because it was the format of their dog reacting to other animals that's really cute, and like people really like that content in that niche. And now if you look at their channel, like they've posted like 10 or 15 videos in that format. About 50% of their uploads are just around that format. And that's really growing them from this sort of 10K mark when we started helping them to like, they're at 30K now. I think they'll be at 100K by the end of the year. So just really focusing on a few formats, I think, is the key to getting to that next milestone.
What happens if the formats that are outliers for you are formats or videos that you don't particularly want to become your entire brand or identity moving forward?
It's a really good question. I think so long as they're still within your niche. So like in that case, the golden retriever reacting to puppies videos, they're still in the niche of like dogs. They're still attracting the right audience for the channel. And I think there is this beautiful thing where you can use that to build some momentum and to sort of tow you along like a slipstream. And then when you want to experiment with maybe other things you want to do, maybe you want to make content that's more vloggy or informational about your golden retriever, you have a bit of an audience there. I think it's a good, like it is a good point, and it's very situational though, that sometimes people feel like they're locked in or trapped into their best performing video. And in that case, I mean, you can always just not do that and then look at what your second best performing bucket is and focus on that. But it's the classic dilemma of like the rock band who make underground music and then go viral with one song that's outside their niche, and then everyone wants that one thing. It's like, it's nothing new. It's just the kind of the artist's dilemma, and it goes back to that sort of scale of, are you an artist or are you a distributor, and where you fall on that spectrum. But it is a real concern. But I think if you feel that and you see that early, you can always just not double down on that video and just say, okay, that worked really well, but it's just not what I want to do. It's a brave decision because it's easier to just double down on that and get those views. But if you say, hey, I just don't want to be that channel, like, I don't know, let's just say someone makes a video on a controversy, they see that does really well, and they're like, I'm not a controversial person, this doesn't feel like my identity, so I'm not going to do that. But this other video I did like a third of the views, but I really liked it, and it still did better than my average. Maybe I can build around that bucket instead.
How do you grow from 100K to 1 million subscribers?
So at that 100K mark, like if you've got there, you've probably got there through a few formats working really well, through a lot of hard work. What gets you to that 1 million mark? I mean, the first thing is like, do we want that, 1 million mark, or, are we happier just like maintaining a slightly smaller channel? So that's always a good question, because you don't have to do anything. You can just stay. You don't have to grow. Of course, with me, I want to grow everything. It's just how I work. It's how I do things. So I would say at that point, we're probably looking at 1 or 2 formats that got us to 100K. If we want to get to 1 million, we probably need 4 or 5 different formats that are working. So more effort being put on ideation. If you're just doing the same format, there are some exceptions to this, but it's very rare to see a channel doing the same format all the way to 1 million subscribers. That can get you that initial traction, but over time you're going to end up fatiguing that bucket or fatiguing that format. And that's when you need to put more focus on ideating some different formats that can also get you there. Like I even think with the Golden Retriever channel example, like I'm going to wait for them to get to 100K. And when they do, I'm going to say, okay, now you guys need to start thinking about other buckets that could work, other formats as well. Because like you're not going to get to 1 million doing the same thing again and again and again, if 1 million is the goal. I think that's one thing. I think definitely like seeing yourself as a creator as more of like an entrepreneur and starting to put yourself in the entrepreneur's mindset. You have to start to adopt more of an entrepreneur's mentality than just like, I'm a little creator who does this part-time. I think at that point you're going to look at it and say, hey, how can I start to build leverage, and how can I start to look at the things that myself as a creator pulls the most leverage? And the thing is, for most creators, that's not editing, and it's not thumbnail design usually. So those are things that I quite often will start to outsource at that point of the journey, because we're probably making some money. We can start to afford to outsource. And what happens is you unlock more time for yourself. Where do you put that time? You put that time towards ideating. You put that time towards the vision and the strategy of what you're trying to do as a channel. And I actually still recommend creators put that time towards thumbnail concepts as well. All too often, creators are like, they don't want to get really good at thumbnail concepts because thumbnail concepts are hard, so they try to hire someone to help them with them. But realistically, I still do thumbnail concepts for channels with 20 million subscribers. Like, it's still something I like doing, and it's still something I'm good at. I'm always trying to work on, and I have plenty of people in my company that could do that for me, but it's still something that I think is high leverage, because you make a good idea, you make a good thumbnail, like, that return on time is huge. The editing return on time could take you 10 hours, 20 hours to edit a video, but someone else could do that for you, and the leverage is not the same. Like, it's not gonna hit the same. So I think getting better at that is really important. Adopting that mentality, and then just like getting into like nice rhythm and schedule as well. Like, whatever your posting schedule is, trying to like stay consistent with that. Trying not to like see it as this war of attrition every week. Trying to enjoy the process as well, I think. And I think one thing that I really struggle with is when creators put like an actual like time limit on when they have to hit 1 million subscribers. I think that takes the fun out of it. Like, I'm okay with setting goals, but I don't like having a subscriber count be the goal. Because if a subscriber count's the goal, I mean, we could just make shorts with like CTAs in them every day for like a year and hit the goal. But the goal should be like sustainable channel growth. The goal should be average views per video on your long form videos. The goal should be monthly revenue. It shouldn't be subscriber count. So I think don't have an actual time limit of when you need to hit that goal. So often creators are like, my goal is to hit 1 million subscribers by the end of the year. And I'm like, it just it's like not a good thing to optimize for, because it doesn't really matter that much. It's just like a status signal. So trying to enjoy the process, I think, is really important.
Patty is an absolute YouTube genius. And if you want to hear more from him, I would highly recommend giving him a follow on Twitter. Now that we've covered what's required to grow on YouTube overall, we can dive into what actually goes into making a killer YouTube video. Starting with the single most important element of any video, part 2, ideation. How do you come up with a good video idea? I have an entire video covering this topic in detail, but I will give an abridged version here. First, you start with the topic. If I say I want to make a video about YouTube thumbnails is my topic. There are lots of ways to get inspiration for different topics, but for most people, topic generation is not the hard part. Most people usually have more topics than they know what to do with. But if you are struggling to come up with topics, there are 2 main ways to get more, which is logical ideation and inspired ideation. Logical ideation is looking at what topics have performed well in the past and what topics have the potential to perform well in the future. And you can find those by seeing what others are doing, looking at things like Google Trends, seeing what kinds of things people are asking for in places like comments, subreddits, or Twitter, looking at what performed well for you in the past, and looking at outliers. We'll get to outliers a little bit later. Inspired ideation is coming up with the topics based on things like brainstorming sessions, mind maps, ideating under constraints, like videos that will take me less than 1 day to do, or videos that will take me $0, and things like shower thoughts or late night thoughts. Having a diverse content diet is incredibly important when it comes to inspired ideation. So you want to be reading, watching, and listening to things that really fire you up, get you energized, and get your brain going. Once you have your list of topics, then you can get into your topic validation stage. This is when you verify or validate that your topic has the potential to get the views that you want. There are 2 main things that you should look for here. First, does proof of prior success exist? If you go on YouTube, search for your topic, and sort by popular, are there many relevant videos that have gotten views above your view goal, whether that's 100K views, 1 million views, or anything else? The second thing to look for is outliers. An outlier is a video that has significantly overperformed a channel's average. So if a channel normally brings in 10K views per video, but one video brings in 100K views, that video is an outlier. I personally like to use a tool called 1 of 10 to help me find outliers, but if you can find many outliers for your topic, that is a great sign that your topic has the potential to get the views that you want. By the way, I'm going to be mentioning a lot of different tools or resources throughout the course of this video, so I will link all of those in the video description to make it easier for you to locate the things that you want. At this point, if you found proof of prior success and outliers for your topic, then your topic has potential. Now it's time to turn that topic into a full-fledged idea. And when doing so, the key thing to consider is a concept called remarkability. Remarkability is how you stand out. And in today's YouTube climate, especially if you're in a more saturated niche, you need to stand out in order to be successful. A creator called Doug talked about this concept in this video, which I highly recommend watching, but I'll share a point that Doug made here. Imagine you're setting up a new stall in a food court that is just dedicated to burgers. There's a Five Guys, a Smash Burger, and just a million other burger joints as far as the eye can see. And let's just say that Five Guys is the burger joint that's doing the best out of all of them. So you might think, oh hey, Five Guys is doing well, so I should make food just like Five Guys. The problem is, if you make food just like Five Guys, no one will ever eat at your burger joint. Because why would they eat at knockoff Five Guys when original Five Guys is right there? But if you take the concept of a burger and add your own twist, like for instance, taking elements of a burrito and combining it and making a burgerito, then you end up with something original. No one else is making burgeritos. And it may be kind of weird and not everyone will like it, but the people who do like it will keep coming back to your food stall every single time because there's nowhere else to get it. As you think about your own unique offering though, it is important to consider what your goals are and how many people in the world exist that like the same things that you like. If your offering is super niche and a maximum of maybe 100 people like that thing, that is a really important factor to consider. But ultimately, you can be remarkable by either being significantly better than what already exists or by being significantly different from what already exists. And most of us can't do better, so we need to be different. And the best way to be different is by leaning into your strengths. That's exactly how gaming creator Aristotle grew his channel to hundreds of thousands of subscribers and 100 million views.
I would say it's really important to think about what your strengths are. Let's say you're like a top 10 player in Fortnite. You're really great. You always win. People are going to want to see that. So you should lean into tips and tricks or lean into crazy gameplay clips that nobody else can show off. And really, that is your format. That is what you show off to everybody because they can't find it in anywhere else. Or maybe if you're really good at making people laugh in chat or whatever, you do voice chat and you make people laugh. There's a channel I've been watching recently. I think his real name's Slater. I can't remember the channel name, but he basically plays Call of Duty Warzone, but he has a voice changer on his mic. So he sounds like a 10-year-old kid. So everything he says is just really funny because it sounds like a 10-year-old kid, but you know, as the audience, it's this guy who's, you know, an adult who's just really great at the game. So there's that contrast there, and it's really funny. So he leans into being hilarious while he plays, and he's also really good. If you're not, let's say you're not great at the game, you can't make everybody laugh. I'm guilty of this. I don't have those two skills. I lean into my creativity and unique ideas. So I try to showcase parts of Mario games, Nintendo games that nobody's ever seen or ever been able to do before. And that's how I decided to take my direction to do something that stands out, that's hopefully remarkable against everything else.
Your own strengths could be something that you already know about yourself, or it could be something that's discovered over time through comments from your viewers. Like if they say they really like your relatability, or your depth of research, or your conversational tone, or your expertise, or anything else. Identifying your own strengths is definitely not an overnight thing. Sometimes it results from years of improving on something. Just take it from Aristotle.
My most popular video is I Made Mario Wonder in Mario Maker 2, where I remade the entire trailer frame by frame within this Mario Maker 2 game. And the only reason I could do that and make it look identical is because of all the skills that I had acquired over years of working with this game. So the longer you do it, the better ideas you're going to start having because you just know the game inside and out.
One of the best ways to incorporate your unique strengths into a video idea is by leveraging a format that caters to your specific strength. There are 6 main formats on YouTube, and each of them provide a different reason for a viewer to click. We click on tutorials to learn how to do something ourselves. We click on challenges to discover the outcome of the challenge, to experience all the struggles, successes, and surprises along the way. We click on breakdowns to answer questions we don't know the answers to. We click on commentaries to hear a specific perspective. We click on vlogs to glimpse into others' lives. And we click on interviews to hear in-depth, personal, or exclusive information that we can't get elsewhere. Once you've decided on one or more formats for your idea, you can also use different angles to make your idea more interesting, or to twist it in ways that no one has done before. I go into much more detail about formats and angles in my ideation video, so I will link that in the video description if you're interested. So that's how you can come up with topics, verify that those topics have potential, and build upon them to create a completely new idea. How do you decide whether an idea is worth it or not? Everyone should have their own criteria set up for whether or not an idea is worth making. From what I've seen, there tends to be 6 main categories of criteria. First is feasibility. Is this idea feasible? Is it possible for you to execute on this idea? Next up is new audience interest. If someone saw this idea but had no idea who you are, would they still be interested? The third is existing audience interest. Is this idea interesting to at least 80% of your existing audience? Next up is view potential. Does this idea have the potential to hit your view goal, whether it's 100K views, 1 million views, or anything else? The fifth is brand alignment. Does this idea fit with the brand of your channel? And finally, there's packageability. Can you come up with a strong title and thumbnail for this idea? We'll talk about this more in the next sections. I also like adding the criteria of personal excitement because, in my opinion, if you're not enjoying most of the content that you make, you're setting yourself up for burnout and eventual failure. Your own rating criteria can be different, but for me, I like to have a personal excitement floor of 7 out of 10. If an idea is underneath a 7 for personal excitement, it doesn't get made. And then from there, I'll go through the rest of the checks. I will say that not every single video idea you make has to follow every single one of these criteria. And this goes for literally every single piece of YouTube advice in this video. We're sharing the best practices and things that we've learned over our collective decades of experience. But every single one of us would agree that you should absolutely leave room for experimentation and trying out new things, regardless of any rules or best practices. Part 3. Titles. Titles are something that can absolutely make or break a YouTube video. So to help me cover titles, I've brought in Jake Thomas, who is the maker behind the popular Creator Hooks newsletter and is quite possibly the most knowledgeable YouTube title expert in the world. And today, he's here to share that knowledge with you. How do you make clickable titles?
So the simplest answer is the 3 click-worthy emotions: curiosity, fear, and desire. If you just want the simple answer, is this title clickable? It's, does it have 1 or 2, maybe even 3 of those emotions? Some of the worst titles are just boring. They're plain. They're just plain statements. They don't really make you feel anything. They don't, pique your curiosity or give you a tinge of fear or get you super excited. And if it doesn't do that, it's probably not a good title.
Out of those 3 click-worthy emotions, curiosity is the one that is by far the most important.
So I've talked to people like Pat Flynn and Daryl Eves. I'm like, hey, what do you think makes a good title? And they both said one word: curiosity. So if you can get people curious about your content, then they're going to click. So that's the gatekeeper. It's the most powerful emotion. It's it is the one thing you need to learn how to do. Most people, when they think about curiosity, they just want to ask a question. They're like, oh, what's the best way to write a YouTube title? Question mark. I don't love questions because typically on YouTube, and this is really any content, making a bold statement is more attractive and will get people interested. If it's polarizing, people are like, oh, I agree with that or I disagree with that. Just making a bold statement that kind of makes somebody go, wait, what? So the easiest way to build curiosity is to open up a loop. You might know this as a cliffhanger or a curiosity gap. It's pretty much just starting a story but not finishing it. So a title might be this is the best way to write YouTube titles in 2024. Okay, that's a bold statement, but it's okay, what is the best way? Or if you're not getting enough subscribers on YouTube, do this. Again, it's a cliffhanger. It's do what? I have to click, and I've got to click and see what they're talking about. That bold statement of also it's encouraging that this person will be able to solve my problems. It's I know I'm in the right hands. When they make this bold claim that they can help me reach my goals. That's another reason why I don't love questions. So an open loop is the most common way to build curiosity. And just pretty much start your story, but don't finish it. There's a bunch of other ways. I've been kind of loving contrast recently. So it's just like pairing two opposites against each other. So Mr. Beast used this and got like literally 1 billion views. That was like his $1 versus like $250 million vacation, $1 versus $250 million or yacht or boat, whatever it was, jobs, all that whole series. That's just contrast of like, pairing two opposite things together. And they kind of make you're like, wait, what? Like there's such a big difference. Like you do a double take. It's so interesting. And, other ways to use it, like one of my favorite titles is luxury fashion is for broke people. So like luxury fashion, broke people like, wait, that doesn't make sense. But really just pairing two things that like don't really go together and like saying, hey, these do go together. That just builds so much curiosity. So you've got to click and you got to see, hey, what's going on here?
There are countless different ways to open curiosity gaps in titles, and Jake was kind enough to provide us with a list of different methods and title formats that tend to work across different niches. And if you want to see more, I would highly recommend checking out his free Creator Hooks newsletter, which I'll link in the video description. But Jake also has advice for finding more niche-specific ways to evoke curiosity.
Whenever I start a new channel, this is the first thing I do, is I build out a list. It's called like, the Model 10, or like, it's just a list of adjacent channels. So if, let's say, for example, you had a channel in like how to take care of your lawn or something, like you had a lawn care channel, I would look up other channels like pool care channels, like fitness channels, like other kind of like educational channels where like if you're teaching somebody how to take care of their lawn, what are some other niches where people are teaching somebody how to do something? Just like create a list of like 10 channels that you want to be like that are not in your niche, but they have similar content or like similar content style, and just see what is working for them. Just looking for outliers, and then just model those titles, those frameworks for your niche. Some of them will include curiosity, not all of them. Some of them might include like desire or fear, or other kind of click triggers or other interesting things that make people click. But that is just the easiest thing that you can do. And like when I was first writing titles, like I never came up with anything new. I would always just look for what works. So we had a fishing channel, and we were like fishing education. So I would look for like what worked for like, finance education. So 10 best credit cards of 2024 would work for them. And I would write a title called 10 best trout lures of 2024, and always modeling, never coming up with anything new. And then eventually, once you get the hang of it, once you get really good at writing titles, once you know what makes people click, then you can start kind of coming up with ideas yourself.
In the last section, we talked about different angles that you could take on an idea. And one of the best ways for those different angles to manifest is through title variations.
Let's say for you, like, if I have a YouTube education channel, there are only like a handful of things that people want to do, right? Like, you can only make so many videos where the title is exactly what they're looking for. And in reality, like, okay, they want to grow their views, or they want to grow their channel and get more views. But like, how do we say the same thing, this one idea, how do we say this like 50 times? So like, okay, let's try to have like a curiosity-based title. It's like, do this to get more views in 2024. Or like, let's have a fear-based title, as in like, okay, this small mistake is ruining your channel. Or let's have like a desire-based channel, like, here's how this creator went from 0 to 1 million subscribers in 12 months or something. So, and those could all be topics for the same essential idea. And if that is what works for your channel, and that's what gets views for you, and also is what is converting for actual business for you, then find those topics. And most channels have like 5 to 10 topics, and just attack those topics with different titles of like, with all these different angles, like curiosity, fear, and desire. I'll go through all those, and I'll be like, all right, what makes the most sense for my channel, like kind of what goes with my channel's vibe and like what I'm trying to accomplish with this channel. So like a fear-based title can often do really well, but it might not be what you're looking for. Some people don't like fear, and I get it. Or like, sometimes you feel like, oh, my channel's like just so negative because I've been doing fear. Like, let me try to switch it up. You will definitely, take that into consideration. So maybe you do more curiosity or desire-based, but it's really just, I kind of have my central idea, and I just attack it from a bunch of different angles, using different ideas, different click triggers, things that make people click, and then using that to write a bunch of titles, and then kind of slowly whittle that down.
What are different ways you can whittle down your list of title variations?
A couple ways. One, gut feel. What do I like best? What makes me feel the best? What am I most excited about? That's like kind of the easiest way. Two, so I have a group of like three other guys where we all have like similar channels, and we will bounce off titles and thumbnails from each other, and I'll see what they think about it. So if you have that group, awesome, ask that group. If you don't, make that group, because that will probably be like the best thing you ever do. But also you can just like ask your friends, ask people in your niche, ask people who you like their judgment, asking friends, and then also looking at your channel's history, your competitors, and then other that Model 10, your adjacent channels, looking at all of those, and okay, I wrote 20 different titles. Are any of these, like, is there any proof that this angle has worked for my channel, for my competitors, or for other channels? Have I seen that to work? Like, if it's totally new, then that is like a high risk, high reward title, where like you could just be bringing something new into this niche that no one has ever seen, but it's based on a proven click trigger and proven psychology. Like, oh, there's a pretty good chance that this could do really well because it's totally new, but really good. However, there's also a big chance that nobody cares about it, right? Like that, you've never seen it in your niche because it doesn't work. I mean, it really depends on how much experience you have writing titles. For me, I do a little bit more high risk, high reward if I am confident in everything else. Like if all right, I know this content is good, I know the idea is good, I know I'm not like, I don't have to have a win here. Like if this video flops, whatever, I don't care. If my channel is kind of, if I'm feeling pretty good about that. On the other hand, like, if my channel is like tanking and like we're just in a rut, I probably am not going to do this high risk, high reward title. I'm going to go with something more proven. So I'll go with one of those titles.
Do capitalization and length matter in titles?
If you use all caps, it'll be harder to read. And if it's harder to read, people are less likely to click your titles. So I'm not a big fan of all caps. Sometimes I will capitalize one word if I really want to emphasize it, but it really kind of depends on like the vibe of your channel. If you're kind of a hypey channel, then capitalization kind of fits with that brand. If you're like just a chill, casual channel, like that's like kind of the vibe and the brand you're going for, I probably wouldn't use capitalization. If you can also just use it to convey emotion. So like if you got fired from your job, like, it's all over, all undercase, ... just has a really different vibe than like it's all over, like, all uppercase, exclamation mark. So, it really depends on your brand and the vibe you're trying to go for. As far as capitalization, I don't think it matters that much. I think if you just capitalize the first letter of every word, that's probably like the safest thing to go to. But I would definitely recommend not capitalizing everything because it's a little harder to read.
What about length of title? Can we get into that? YouTube gives you up to 100 characters for your title. Should you be using all of them? Should you be intentionally not using many of them? How do you think about title length?
Big, broad answer, going back to the titles in CreatorWorks Pro. Last time we checked, the average title length was 54.5 characters. That's a huge answer. The more nuanced answer is it depends on your traffic source and your audience. So if you have a younger audience, you probably want to have shorter titles. If you have an older audience, you can get away with longer titles. It depends on your traffic source. So if you're trying to rank and search, when people are searching, they're actively searching, so they're more likely to actually like read your whole title. So you can have longer titles because they're looking for an answer for something. So they're willing to put in more effort. Versus if they're just like scrolling, if you're trying to get views from the homepage, people are more passively scrolling. You're not even searching, they're just scrolling. So you want shorter titles so that they will be able to more quickly like digest what your video is about. If they're like super long titles, it's like, no, I'm scrolling right on by. Like this is too much work to read and to understand and to comprehend what this video is about.
How important is SEO in titles? If you're not familiar, SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. YouTube gets a huge amount of search traffic, and you may have even seen YouTube search show up as a traffic source on one of your videos, which means that your video is getting views from showing up in search results. Now, there are ways to optimize your title for ranking in search results. This is usually done through something called keyword research, which is the process of finding keywords that have a high search volume and a low competition. I go through that process in depth in this video of mine. Now, as to whether or not you should optimize your title for ranking in search, that depends on what your goals are. The main mechanism for a video going viral on YouTube is through YouTube's recommendation system, with your video showing up on people's homepages. And the thing is, people's behavior is different when they're intentionally searching for something versus when they're more passively browsing, looking for something to watch. If your goal is to go viral, it's better to structure your title with browse-based viewing in mind. This means creating more of a curiosity gap in your title, or more fear or desire. With a search-optimized video, in contrast, the title should be more so optimized for clarity. The intention to click is already there. Your goal in your title is to convince them that your video is the right one to watch for the thing that they're searching for. If you have something to direct traffic to, like an offer, then ranking in search can be really great, because it tends to rank for a very long time, and the people who find your videos from that tend to be higher quality leads. Having some videos optimized for search can also lead to a strong back catalog. For example, if you have 10 videos which each bring in 100 views per day from search results, that's 30,000 views per month from search traffic alone, which is not bad at all. But if your goal is to go viral, then your best bet is to optimize your content for browse. Part 4. Thumbnails. How do you make clickable thumbnails? I also have a very detailed breakdown of thumbnails, but I'll still give an overview here. So the first thing to focus on is giving your viewers a reason to click. And just like in titles, you can do that by evoking curiosity. And while there are countless different ways to evoke curiosity, there are 5 main ways that we do so in thumbnails. We have moment thumbnails, which offer a glimpse into the moment right before a powerful reaction. Story thumbnails, which introduce a point of tension or question that sets up the first act of a story. Result thumbnails, which feature a desired result. Transformation thumbnails, which feature both a desired result and a beginning state. And novelty thumbnails, which are their power from a natural urge to experience something we've never seen before. But in order for someone to click on your thumbnail, they have to notice it in the first place, which can be hard when they're met with countless thumbnails every single time they log on to YouTube. But as humans, we're biologically wired to notice or pay attention to certain things that I call scroll stoppers. A classic example is the use of faces, but other elements like familiarity, money, large numbers, bright colors, danger or movement, emotions, and things that are aesthetically pleasing are also great at stopping the scroll. Once you have your curiosity gap and one or more scroll stoppers in place, you have the foundation for your thumbnail. Then we can move to actually putting these elements together in thumbnail construction. And for that, you can follow the 3 C's of thumbnail design: contents, composition, and contrast. When it comes to contents, the main elements of a thumbnail are separated into the main character and the supporting characters. The main character is the focal point of the thumbnail, while the supporting characters are there to help support the main character in creating the curiosity gap. And this distinction between main characters and supporting characters is actually quite important, because while we tend to think of design as adding things, great design is actually about getting the main point across as quickly as possible. And one of the best ways to do that is through composition. So main characters are usually placed in the center of symmetrical thumbnails or on the right or left third of asymmetrical thumbnails. You can also help direct attention to the main character through things like red arrows, leading lines, and differences in scale, blur, and depth. It's really important to keep composition and hierarchy in mind when it comes to text. While thumbnail text can be a main character, you shouldn't rely on people reading a whole bunch of text in a thumbnail in order to understand it. For the most part, text should be a supporting character, and often you don't even need any text at all. But if you do choose to include it, here are some best practices. First, try to keep it at 5 words or less, and use a font that is easy to read at a glance and at a size that is easy to read at a glance. Don't just repeat your title in the thumbnail text. Any text that you add should add something new. And be very careful to not let any supporting character text overshadow your main character. There is one final way to make your main character stand out, and that is through contrast, which is created through color. Color has three main values: luminosity, saturation, and hue. And contrast can be created using each of those three values. Luminosity contrast comes from mixing lights and darks. Saturation contrast comes from mixing colors versus grayscale. And hue contrast comes from mixing complementary colors, or colors opposite to each other on the color wheel. I'm including hue contrast for the sake of completion, but it is by no means a hard and fast rule. In fact, the majority of high-performing thumbnails on YouTube do not include perfectly complementary colors, so really don't get too hung up on it. After you've put together your thumbnail, you can run your finished thumbnail through a series of 3 tests to see if it's ready. The first test is the clarity test, which is seeing if you can make out your thumbnail in its smallest view, which is on the sidebar. Because when we're working on our thumbnails, they're often very, very large, blown up on our entire screen, but when people see it on YouTube, it is much smaller. And to see this preview, I like to use a tool called ClickPilot, which I will link in the video description. The main test is, can you clearly make out your thumbnail in its smallest view? Can you read every single word, and can you understand what everything is? Next up is the contrast test. If you put your thumbnail alongside lots of other thumbnails within your niche, does your thumbnail stand out? Does it draw attention? And does it have the power to stop someone's scroll? And finally, you have the glance test. If you pull up your thumbnail on your phone and then show it to someone for 2 seconds, will they be able to know what they saw? Will they be able to tell you what they saw? And will they be able to know what your video is about? If you can't pass all 3 tests, go back and make changes. But if you do pass them, then hey, you got a thumbnail. I also wouldn't just stop there though, because YouTube now has thumbnail A/B testing, which allows you to test multiple thumbnails at once to see which one performs better. Then YouTube will show these thumbnails to viewers on an impression by impression basis. And as it does so, it will track each of the thumbnail variations' total watch time share. Essentially, out of all of the total watch time on a video, how much of it came from each thumbnail. This metric takes both CTR, or click-through rate, and AVD, or average view duration, into account. We'll cover these metrics in more detail later on in the analytics section. But essentially, if each thumbnail yields the exact same average view duration, so everyone's watching the video around the same amount of time, which is usually the case, then the thumbnail with the highest click-through rate, or CTR, would drive the most total views, and therefore be responsible for the biggest portion of total watch time share. At the same time, there could be a thumbnail that has a very high click-through rate, but a very low average view duration, because that thumbnail could be super clickbaity and people could see it and click, but then end up clicking off of the video really fast because they think, hey, that's not what I clicked on, and I would have a lower total watch share. It is definitely worth coming up with a couple of different thumbnails to test because they can yield significantly different results. And I've seen even seemingly small changes lead to actual differences in total watch time share, so it's definitely something to do. I find it hard to think about thumbnails first. Should I still do that though? So many of the top YouTubers have their packaging, so that means their title and their thumbnail, done before they start working on the video itself. There's a reason why the title and thumbnail sections of this video came right after the ideation video. Aha! Everything is intentional. But the reasoning behind this really early title and thumbnail creation is that they want to avoid pouring all of this energy and effort and resources into a video only to not have any way to package it later on the line. Because if people don't click, then people won't watch. And then all the effort that's poured into the video would be wasted. So to avoid that, they make their titles and thumbnails first, to verify that they'll be able to have something that is clickable. Now, this is something that is much easier said than done, especially if you're really excited to start working on a video right away, or if you have very limited time or energy. But I do maintain that it is important to start thinking about titles and thumbnails as early as you can. And if you're making a video that features something that you're going to create later on, like a craft, that's great. When I say finalize your titles and thumbnails first, it doesn't mean having it 100% done. But you should aim to at least have mock-ups or concepts for your thumbnails, even if you do have filler images that are there to stand in until you have the final product later on. But the closer that you can get to a finalized thumbnail, and the earlier on you can do that, the better. Because you never want to waste a good video on a bad title or thumbnail. What software do you use to make your thumbnails? I use Figma because it feels intuitive to me, but I'm definitely an outlier in that case because most people tend to use Canva or Photoshop. Part 5. Research. How do you conduct research for a video? My research process is split between the information collection phase and the information connection phase. In the information collection phase, I gather as much information as I possibly can on my topic. I like to start out with primary sources of information. Interviews posted online is a great place to get that, as well as podcasts. I'll also reach out and conduct interviews of my own to get more information. After that, if I feel like I need it, I'll go through secondary sources of information, or other videos posted talking about this topic, or Twitter threads on the topic, other things like that. I also like to look at tangential industries. So if I'm researching YouTube thumbnails, for instance, I'll also look into the theories behind things like book covers, or movie posters, or Netflix thumbnails, because theory and information from those industries might be applicable to YouTube in a way that most people haven't thought about yet. Whenever I gather these notes, I like to add timestamps so I can go back to any specific point and listen to it again or clip it if I need to. After information collection is done, I will move on to information connection. This is when I'll start grouping or connecting different pieces of information from different sources of information. And to do that, I will start making buckets and pulling each bullet point I have into either an existing bucket or adding a new one. If points or insights from different sources are compiled into the same bucket, I know that that bucket is probably a good one. And then I'll go through that entire process again, combining buckets if they are similar enough. After I have my buckets in place, each with points, insights, or supporting evidence from multiple sources, then my research phase will be complete. I'll move on to outlining and script writing. Part 6, script writing. I get asked about script writing all the time, and to help me answer questions about script writing, I have brought in George Blackman, a remarkable scriptwriter who's worked with clients like Ali Abdaal, Noah Kagan, and Mike Shake. He's been responsible for over 25 million video views. He teaches scriptwriting for a living, and now he's here to share that knowledge with you. How do you write a great script?
I think at its core, like the way I've tried to distill this into I have kind of like a writing system that I use and that I try and teach my students. And it kind of boils down to, first of all, knowing who your audience is. That's really at the heart of all of it, is having a strong awareness of who you're talking to. And that is the most boring step, and it makes for a very like boring start to a conversation about this, because it doesn't feel fun to like create an audience avatar. It feels very marketing-y, very kind of corporate. But you do need to know who you're talking to, because it just makes the whole process of writing a great script easier, because it reduces the number of choices you have to make. That kind of overthinking that comes in when you're asking yourself, should I phrase the sentence like this or like that? Does my hook need to be 30 seconds, or can I shorten it to 10 seconds? Like how much proof do I need to show in my hook to get the audience interested? Like what are my audience even interested in? All of that stuff, that second voice that's in your head, that disappears once you know who you're talking to and once you get familiar with your audience. So that's the first step. The second thing, and this is kind of nebulous, but if we're talking about writing a great script, it has to be something that is sustainable for you. Like the process of physically writing that script needs to be sustainable. So when I first started talking about all this stuff publicly, I was really, really hammering down the door of script everything. Like that was kind of my thing. That's what I wanted to try and, that was my spiky point of view that I wanted to talk about online. And that still kind of works as a vehicle for putting my point of view across. But ultimately, that's not functional for a lot of people. And if you are forcing yourself to spend 10 hours, 20 hours scripting every single script that you do, and it's causing you to get stressed out, get tired, maybe it feels like word for word scripting doesn't really just jive with you on the day when you're filming, and then the resultant video is no good, then that's a problem. And ultimately, the process of YouTube as a whole has to be sustainable. So maybe it's the case that you go for what I call like level 1 scripting, which is where you basically break down your script into the fundamental points that need to be addressed. So you do like a kind of wild brainstorm where you talk about, or where you're just thinking, okay, what could go into this video? Like if I'm not like settling on anything yet, but blue sky thinking, what ideas do I think probably need to be in here? What pieces of flashes of B-roll have I got in my mind? What visual moments do I have? What could go in here? And basically then, once you've done that, taken a little time away from it, you basically just trim it down to, let's say the 5 or the 10, whatever it is, key components of that video. So educational, it might be like the 5 points that are necessary to understand the ultimate point of the video. If it's entertainment, it will be like, so whatever it might be, the 5 things that are going to happen in the build up to you doing big explosion thing at the end, whatever that thing is. And for a level 1 script, that's enough. You have those 5 key moments, that kind of the payoff for each of those segments in your head. That's all you need. And then again, like you can kind of level that up. Level 2 is where you basically break those 5 points up into, as I think of it, like setup, tension, and resolution, or payoff, I suppose, setup, tension, payoff. So again, each of those segments ends with a very clear payoff, but you're thinking about, okay, so I know what the payoff is for that segment. How am I going to set that up really effectively and get my viewer excited about that little payoff at the end of the segment, and then drive tension as I move towards it? Again, in terms of sustainability, it's a little less sustainable because you're having to put a lot more time and thought into that process, but it's still not fully scripted, and ultimately you still have, hopefully, a great script at the end of it, which you might have to do a bit of riffing to get from setup through the tension through to the payoff, for the whole script. But ultimately, that's still a great script because you've spent time thinking about it and the process is sustainable. Then ultimately, level 3 is the kind of the final step where rather than just having those bullet points, you expand them into full points. But for a lot of people, a great script lives at level 2, I think. If you've thought about the payoff for each segment and you've thought about how you set it up really, really nicely, then that's a great script, in my opinion.
George uses a setup, tension, and payoff framework, which is remarkably similar to a framework I like to use that I've taken from novel writer Brandon Sanderson, 3 P's of plot, which is promise, progress, and payoff. This structure is the key to writing any engaging script. So let's dive deeper into it, starting with setup.
The setup, this comes back to what I spoke about just before about knowing who your audience is. So for them, it's like, what is it about this segment of the video? Say you've got a video that has 4 main segments and you need to get your audience excited for each of those segments. You need to know basically what they care about. So let's imagine, I don't know why my default is always like a gardening example, because I do not have a garden and I'm not a gardener. I would like to have a garden, but I don't. And so let's say like we're doing a tutorial that is about how to grow amazing pumpkins or something, and bizarre choice of vegetable, but let's go with that. And so the ultimate point of the video, the reason they're watching is because they want to know how to grow a pumpkin. Is pumpkin a fruit or a vegetable? This is irrelevant.
Fruit.
It's a fruit. It's a fruit. Okay,
Fruit.
cool. Well, hopefully we cut that out. No, we don't have to. So that's the ultimate point of the video, right? They've clicked on the video because they want to know how to grow the biggest pumpkins possible. But then I'm doing my brainstorm and I'm thinking, okay, what are the things that could go into this video? Well, I would probably need to know about the types of seed I'm going to need. Obviously pumpkin seeds, but like, are there any particular types of pumpkin seeds? Are there any vendors that I should buy them from specifically? What type of soil am I going to need? How much space am I going to need? How much sunlight? What time of year? Like all of that stuff. That's kind of in my initial brainstorm. Then I'm narrowing it down and I'm thinking, okay, so like in terms of the order we need to think about this stuff, the first thing I'm going to want to know is probably like, how much space do I need? Because ultimately, if I don't have enough space for it, then it's kind of irrelevant what types of seed I need, what type of, blah, blah, blah. So that would be my segment 1. We'll be talking about what kind of space do you need. So now we come down to the like breaking up the setup, tension, and payoff for that segment. And for me, I'm thinking like, okay, this is kind of maybe not the most interesting one to start with, but in terms of a setup for that, your audience, for example, the worry I would have if I'm an audience member going into that video is I'm expecting that I don't have enough space perhaps for this video, because I feel like pumpkins are huge. If I want to grow a big pumpkin patch, am I going to have enough space? And so the setup is, in my case, you're aware that is the fear your audience has, and so you want to basically evoke that and draw that out of them. So like, you might say that something like the majority of people assume they don't have enough space for growing pumpkins, but as long as you have X specific thing in your garden, I'm going to show you how you can turn any size garden into a viable pumpkin patch or something like that. So that's kind of like, they're almost like mini hooks, these setups. But essentially, at the start of that segment, we're showing that we're aware of that fear and that expectation that the audience member has coming in, that, oh, my garden's probably not big enough, or whatever it is. And you're giving them that little setup, that promise. Like, I assure you that you pretty much regardless of the size of your garden, as long as you have this one thing, we can make a big enough space for you to grow pumpkins. And that one thing could be anything. It could be, I don't know. I'm going to stop trying to guess things about how gardening works, me without a garden. But that's essentially what we're doing, and we're promising them that, like, just stick with me. I understand your problem. I've called it out. but I'm going to guide you through the process of making sure that that I address that problem essentially.
How does the setup change for an entertainment video? And I know that entertainment isn't exactly like your wheelhouse, but do you have like any pointers for people who don't have like a strictly educational type of video?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm less experienced in the entertainment side of things, but I worked with Mike Shake for a while, and I've done like little bits and pieces here and there for people, and yeah, it's kind of simpler really for entertainment stuff, because a lot of the time you don't know what's going to happen, and you can't really script everything before. It's like you'll kind of write the bullet points, you'll go do whatever the thing is, and then you might come back to the script afterwards and write voiceover to help tie it together. But usually the setup is pretty simple. It's like normally you're going to be doing something where I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example of something that's not like generic Mr. Beast blow something up at the end. But there's going to be something that you're ultimately building up to at the end, like say Max Foch hatching a fish from caviar or something, or Michel Carré having a boxing match with somebody, a professional boxer at the end. And it's like, what are the steps necessary to achieve that thing? So in Michelle's case, it's like step one is, I actually can't remember the order of how that stuff goes in the video, but it might be to find a trainer. In this case, I think she goes with Tony Jeffries. And so like for me, that will be the setup. Is like, first I needed to find a trainer. Like, simple as that. You don't need to overcomplicate it. It's just, we know what the ultimate goal is. You've helped give an idea, hopefully in the hook of like what the structure is going to be to build up to that thing. Step one, I needed to find a trainer. And then off you go.
So that's the setup. And after the setup, we move into tension.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe we can return to the pumpkin example again. So in this case, like, we've established the idea that that regardless of how big your garden is, we're going to have something in this segment that's going to tell you, like, show you how you can still have enough space to grow up a massive pumpkin. So the key thing to avoid, and the thing that a lot of people do, is fairly immediately kind of answer what the issue is and give the payoff too soon. So they confuse almost like the tension bit with what the payoff bit should be at the end. So they might say very, very quickly, hey, don't worry, as long as your garden is X dimensions big, you're sorted. You're going to have enough space for growing this pumpkin patch. And now let's talk about some ways that you can, I don't know, prepare your garden to make sure that your pumpkins can grow really fertile. But the problem is, for me, the tension of that first segment, the thing that's been set up is the idea of, oh, actually, I don't know if I am going to have enough space. And being told right out the gate that, no, you definitely have enough space as long as do I hit those dimensions? Yep, my garden's that big. Cool. I know I have enough space for this. I'm going to skip on to segment 2 and learn about picking the right type of seeds or picking the right type of soil or whatever it is. So the key really in the tension segment is making sure you're not revealing that bit too early, essentially. We don't want to be testing the audience's patience and making it feel like you're trying to retention hack them all the time. So maybe in this case where the tension is like, we don't want to give away straight away whether or not they have enough space. We might just get them excited about the prospect of what they're going to be able to grow by showing like a bunch of different examples where, without context, maybe not giving measurements, but it's like, look, here are like snapshot, 3 different gardens, 4 different gardens with amazing pumpkins that have grown in them that clearly look like they are like really small, like a tiny courtyard out the back of someone's house, or it might even be like a window box or something outside somebody's window. And it's like, we're saying, these are, 3 examples, these are, 3 past clients of mine who've all grown prize-winning pumpkins with minimal space. And now we're going to talk about the way that they did that or something like that. And so that way it's like, it's getting people excited again about the idea that, like, visually showing them, okay, that looks pretty small. Oh, that looks pretty small. That looks smaller than my garden. It looks like they're doing it pretty well. And then that's a way of, like, again, continuing to keep people excited about the idea, showing visual evidence of what they're going to, find out shortly. And then at the end of that segment, we can then, deliver the payoff, explain whatever it is. So even if you've got a garden that's smaller than X, Y dimensions, the one thing you need to, set up is this, whatever that thing might be in a gardening context. But we draw out just a little bit of tension by keeping people excited, by showing them what they're going to, what's possible, but without directly saying, these are the dimensions of garden that you need. I really could have picked a more interesting example than growing pumpkins, but we are where we are.
So we've covered setup, we've covered tension. Now let's get into payoff. Can you talk a little bit about the payoff? Because I think when I think about payoff, or when I first heard the term payoff, I'm like, yeah, payoff has to be, and someone wins $1 million. So kind of like, what is payoff to you?
It's kind of the simplest of the three a lot of the time, I think. Especially if, like I was talking about before, if you're writing a level 1 script, as I call it, that's the payoff is basically the only thing you think about. So like a simple, and actually to your point, because I know what you mean, the tendency is for people, because the phrase sounds quite evocative and quite emotive, it feels like it will always need to be this huge thing, but actually it can just be a step towards whatever the grand payoff is. And so an example of this, like if I think of a video that I worked on with Mike Shake, which is one where he's learning to hold his breath for 4 minutes basically, and quite simply, and this is why I want to give this example, is that you don't need to overthink it, is like the payoffs throughout that video are basically he gets a better score. So he holds his breath for like 30 seconds longer than the time before. And then he's like, okay, so I got pretty close this time, but it wasn't enough. So now we're transitioning from one payoff, like, hey, cool, he gets the record, that's a payoff. Then we pivot into the next segment, but I still had, another minute and 30 seconds that I was going to have to learn to hold my breath for. And so I discovered these like advanced techniques for learning to hold your breath for longer that I was going to practice over the next 2 days. And so that's like the setup for the next segment. And then the tension for that next segment is him practicing those breathing techniques, constantly with the goal in mind of, at the end of this segment, I'm going to try and hold my breath again, and I'm going to hopefully do it for longer. The tension is driven by the fact that the breathing exercises don't necessarily seem to be helping that much. And then he'll see like a glimmer of progress, and then like not, and it progresses along in that way to the point where he then is ready to try and hold his breath again. And then he beats his record again, gets another 30 seconds, and that's another payoff. And so that's a kind of entertainment example. But that's how I think about the payoff. Really, it's just the thing you've been building towards happens, and then you very quickly move into the next setup. And that's really the key. Just while we are talking about payoffs, is those moments between when you've paid off the last segment and when you set up the next one. Those are the areas where I see retention problems. Apart from the hook, they are like the most problematic area for people dipping out, because essentially it's like you reach the end of a segment and your head comes above water for a second, to use, well, not to use a recent pun, but as a viewer, your head comes above water because it's like, okay, I've been kind of involved in that segment, I've been emotionally invested in it, but I've come up for air. Like, you've got a second or 2 seconds to capture their attention again and let them know why the next segment is important, to remind them of the overall importance of the video. And if they feel outside the loop of what that structure is, it's all too easy to think the YouTube homepage is just one click away. I don't really know why I should care about this next segment yet. I've kind of forgotten why I clicked on the video in the first place, and I'm out of there. So making sure that gap between paying off one segment and setting up the next one is minimized is critical, yeah.
George has an absolute wealth of knowledge when it comes to script writing, and he actually has a free 5-day email course about it, which I will link in the video description if you're interested. How can you make your scripts sound more human and less robotic? I often find myself sounding like ChatGPT sometimes, and I have no idea how to fix it.
Honestly, I think it comes back to kind of a mixture of what we've spoken about already, in terms of these like levels of scripting. So a level 2 script is probably the point that I'd want to aim at initially, which is, again, where we've got the kind of key payoffs figured out, and then we break those up into setup, tension, and payoff like we've been talking about. That leaves you enough room to kind of riff your way through the rest of it. So I would always encourage you to write word for word the setup and the payoff, because those are like the most, where you can, right? If it's an entertainment video that doesn't allow you to do that, then fine. But particularly with education stuff, the setup is so important for every single segment of your video. Write that word for word if you have the time and inclination to do so. The payoff is super important, making sure that that's like it's delivered in the right way. Write that word for word. But the tension bit at a level 2 script tends to be more bullet pointy, and that's totally fine. It's like, okay, I know where I'm starting, I know where I'm finishing. I've heard songwriters give this advice as well. It's like the start and the end of the song are the most important bits, and then you can kind of figure out the way to get there in between. It's fine to leave that middle section as kind of more bullet pointy. Start riffing it. See how it feels on the day. If it feels like a complete uphill battle and you find that you're really not as good at riffing as you thought you were, which is probably most people, it's not as easy as people I think it is when they get into YouTube. But then it's about fine tuning the amount that you script and kind of leveling, thinking, okay, last time I tried to record with just like 3 bullet points between the setup and the payoff, I just felt stressed and I rambled and the editing was a nightmare. Next time I'm going to write maybe 10 bullet points and just see how that affects the riffing. Now, this is kind of cheating because this isn't teaching you how to actually write a script in a way that doesn't sound like a robot, But it is just basically, I think, as much as possible, if you can just give yourself the guardrails to get from A to B, and then, bullet point it up to the point where you feel comfortable riffing it, that's a nicer way to just still sound human, but with the benefit of having really thought out a really robust structure. And I think what you see over time is that once you've done that enough times, like we were talking over the course of 2, 3, 4 years maybe, you start to figure out, like, after listening to yourself time and time again, seeing which riffs come out quite naturally, it just becomes easier to kind of find your voice.
George's advice here is great if you're someone who doesn't like scripting word for word. I am definitely a word for word scripter myself, so for any other word for word scripters out there, I have 3 pieces of advice. First, write more. The more you write, the better you'll get. And I don't just mean YouTube scripts. For me, journaling helps a lot. Whenever I journal, I stream of consciousness write, and that writing sounds exactly like I talk. So the more conversational tone that I develop there carries directly into my YouTube scripts. Second, you can try dictating your video out loud, and then using the transcript for that as the basis for your more human-sounding script. And the third piece of advice is more so for a later pass of scripting when you're into the script editing process. I will read my script over out loud, and then any sentence or phrase that I trip over or doesn't feel natural for me to say, I will rewrite in a way that does feel more natural or is easier to say. Part 7, production. What's your video production process from ideation to publish? So I always start out with the topic of the video that I want to make. Then I'll think about different formats or angles that I want to incorporate into the idea. I will go through my ideation criteria process as well, but usually that's something that's more so happens within my own head as opposed to written down on a spreadsheet. Once I've picked an idea to work on, I'll try to get a couple of different title and thumbnail variations in my mind first, before I start working on it. If I'm being 100% honest with you, I am not as good at that as I should be, but I do try to have at least one promising direction in mind before I move forward. Then I'll start video prep. The level of prep looks different for different types of videos. For my deep dives, I will launch straight into the research process. For other types of videos, I might start by writing down all the bullet points of everything that I might possibly want to include in the video. And for this video, that prep was asking people about what questions they had about YouTube, and then compiling all of those into a gigantic Google Doc. After I have some sort of organized prep, whether that's my finalized research buckets or some groups of things to include in the video, I will start outlining my video. Also, I do get feedback from my group of YouTube friends at every step of that process, starting with ideation and then going into their thoughts on the title and thumbnail. I'll get their thoughts on my research. I'll get their thoughts on my outline. Every single part of the process, I'm getting their feedback on, so I can iterate and make changes as I go along, which has been so incredibly useful. After my outline, I head into scripting. And depending on the script that I'm writing and how hard it is, my script can go through anywhere from 3 to 22 different rewrites. Once my script is finalized, I will annotate my script. And this is a super important part of my process that I added last year that has been an absolute game changer for me. In the annotation stage, I will go back through my script and comment out what is happening on screen during every sentence or phrase. And that'll be broken into talking head, full screen text, animations and visuals, screen shares, and B-roll. Then I'll turn all of my required B-roll for the video into a shot list. This becomes super helpful for me during my filming stage because then I know what lines I need to deliver directly into the camera as A-roll versus what lines I can just read as voiceover because I know it'll be covered up by B-roll or screen shares or something else in the finalized version of the video. It also takes a lot of the mental burden out of the editing process. So for me, editing is more so about execution versus about the decision making in the moment. After I have my annotations and my shot list done, then I will film, both my talking head A-roll and any B-roll that I'm filming as well. Then comes the edit, which I'll talk about more in the editing section. For now, I'll just say that I do my rough cut first, so that's kind of cleaning up my main talking head footage. Then I'll add my B-roll, then I'll add my music, then I'll go through and do the visual edit from start to finish, and then I will add any sound effects. After my edit is done, I will send it off for feedback with friends and then make adjustments as needed. At that point, I will finalize my title and thumbnail, and I'll usually try to have a couple of different variations to A/B test. And then it's time for upload. I don't really do anything special for uploading besides just making sure that all my timestamps are all in place and that any credits or links that I want to add to the description are all good to go. How do you get more comfortable speaking in front of the camera and developing your own speaking voice? Is it all reps or is there more nuance to it? So I'm a lot more comfortable on camera now than I used to be, but that has not always been the case. When I was just starting out, I did not like being on camera at all. I didn't even like taking pictures of myself, and the editing process felt like torture because I hated the sound of my own voice, and all editing was listening to my own voice over and over again for hours. The hearing my own voice thing was something that unfortunately only got better with time, but when it comes to getting more comfortable speaking on camera, I do have some more concrete pieces of advice. Oh, also, I do have a full video just dedicated to this very topic. Tip number 1 would be that after pressing record, but before going into the content of the video, I would kind of stream of consciousness talk to my camera for a while, just to warm me up. And this would be things like as random as, hello, I am here and I'm ready to film. And I'm staring into a glass lens completely alone in this room, and that feels awkward, but that's okay because we're doing it anyway. And then I'll just keep talking like that for a while until I get more used to it and my voice kind of returns back to normal speaking cadence. The second thing that I did was use my camera as my webcam for taking video calls, which I could do using a software called Sony Imaging Edge because I have a Sony camera. And that made me get a lot more comfortable talking to my camera during video calls because I was talking to actual people on the other side as opposed to just talking by myself in an empty room. And the third main thing that I did was practice. So I would speak through my entire video at least once or twice, either the day before filming or right before filming, so I'm more used to everything that I am saying. I also discovered that I was more comfortable when I scripted out my video word for word. Now, not everybody works that way. Some people are much more comfortable with just bullet points, and scripting everything out word for word throws them off. It's really just something that you have to try out both options and see which one works best for you. But for me, that was scripting word for word. So I had my script all right next to me on my laptop, just out of frame of the camera, and I'd go and I'd read 1 or 2 lines and then deliver those 1 or 2 lines into the camera and then go back and forth and put everything together in post-production. And because it might be helpful for someone out there, I'm going to include some of the raw footage of what this video looks like, so you maybe feel less alone, because I am definitely by no means perfect at my camera delivery. Everyone should have their own criteria set up for whether or not an idea is worth making. Everyone should have their own criteria set up for whether or not... Everyone should have their own criteria set up for whether or not an idea is worth making. From what I've seen, there tends to be 6 overall main criteria. From what I've seen, there tends to be 6 categories of From what I've seen, there tends to be 6 main categories of criteria. Part 8. Editing. What's the process or order for editing a YouTube video? What are the main ingredients of an edit you should focus on? My own personal process starts with script annotation, and then the rough cut of the A-roll or talking head footage, then placing in any filmed B-roll, then the music edit, then the visual edit from start to finish, and then rounding it off with any sound effects. Script annotation front loads all of the decision making of the edit, so going into the edit for me, I already have an idea of what's going on screen at any one time. Then I do my rough cut of my talking head footage and my voiceover, where I cut out any silences, mistakes, or bad takes. I usually prefer tighter edits with my more higher produced stuff, so I will also cut out any breaths in between sentences as well. For this rough cut, I really like using a tool called Gling, which automatically removes any silences for you. It seriously saves so much time. I'll link it in the video description. I'd recommend using Gling mostly for fully scripted out content or talking head content. I don't think it's as useful for other different forms of content or formats, mostly because the edit tends to come together in a different way. So my rough cut gives me an estimated video length. Then at that point, I'll come in and put in any B-roll that I filmed. There's no real reason why I do B-roll at this point. For me, it's mostly because I usually don't have that much B-roll, so just getting it all out there in the timeline feels like I can just give myself a check mark on something and have a sense of progress early on, which I like. Once my rough cut is done and my B-roll is in place, then I will move into music. I used to save music as the very last thing that I did, but I realized that two negative things happened if I did so. One, because the music step was the very last thing that I processed in between me and uploading my video, I tended to rush through the process because I wanted to get the video done and published as fast as I could. Second, doing music last made it harder to edit to the music, which I normally like doing because it helps make the video feel better. Music is honestly such a huge part of any video, and yes, even educational videos, because music really helps set the tone, style, and energy of a video. So for me, I would listen to the entire video with just the rough cut, any filmed B-roll, and just the music. And if it felt boring or repetitive in places, I would go back and change the music first. Because when the music is good, the visual edit is better. And then I can also edit any sort of visuals to go with the music, which helps the entire video feel more cohesive and put together. For this particular video, because it is so unreasonably long, I didn't treat music as intentionally, but I really pay lots of attention to it with my more highly edited stuff. After the music edit, I will start on the visual edit, starting with the intro, in which I will front load a lot of the higher quality edits to give viewers a sense of what they can expect moving forward and kind of hopefully blow them away with the quality right out of the bat. The visual edit for me is mostly just a combination of talking head footage, B-roll, any screen shares, motion graphics or visuals, and full screen text. And because I've already planned everything out in the script annotation, all this really is just about execution. And then once the visual edit is all done, I'll go back and add certain sound effects to line up with certain visuals, like mouse clicks, pops, swooshes, and keyboard typing. And that's my process. And just to be clear, I am not a great editor. I do not do everything the most efficient way, and there are tons of different features in my editing software that I have no idea how to use. But I just do what makes the most sense for my brain. And for me, I think that's what's most important. Your editing is top-notch. What advice would you give on editing a video? My biggest piece of advice is probably just to try stuff. It took me a long time to find my editing style, and even now it's still evolving. Look for cool things that you see other creators do. And instead of thinking, wow, that looks so cool, but I'm sure I could never do anything like that, just try. Look up tutorials, experiment. You may not be able to perfectly replicate it, but you might be able to come a lot closer than you think. My own editing style for motion graphics came because I started with a more simpler editing software that didn't have a lot of fancy features. So I just did what I could with the slide transition, cropping, and the zoom position and opacity keyframes. That's literally it. So just try everything. I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I could give you in the long run. It may take you forever to edit one 10-second sequence, but you'll learn so much in the process. And the next time you do it, you'll be much quicker. What advice would you give to someone who's editing their first video? Keep it as simple as possible. And I know that I just laid out this huge, complicated process, but for your first edit, I would really just focus on making cuts, adding text, adding visuals like screen recordings, pictures, or clips, and maybe trying to add some light background music. That's it. And then with each subsequent videos that you make, try adding something new, like a transition, or keyframes to make something move, or color grading. Over time, your skills will add up until you're editing like a pro. But in the beginning, keep things as simple as possible. Is it possible to succeed on YouTube if you don't have fast editing or animations? Absolutely, and there are plenty of examples of that happening. Azul Wells, Jenny Nicholson, and Sam Sulik are great examples of this, among many more. And as with most things, it ultimately comes down to audience. If your audience is a bunch of 14-year-olds, then yes, they may want faster edits. But not every audience wants that. It also depends on what the goal of your content is. If it's strictly to entertain and you want to serve a younger audience, then yes, faster editing is in fashion now. But a lot of people are getting fatigued with super fast edits and a zillion things happening on screen all at the same time. Sometimes you just want to feel like you're hanging out with a creator, and slower, more minimal editing can be preferred because then you get to see more of their quirks and personality. And if you're trying to teach things, the edit should be optimized for the best transfer of information. This often means including visuals to help reiterate points, but not putting so much on screen that it distracts the viewer from the information that they're trying to learn. Basically, it's all a giant it depends, and my best advice would be to try out different styles and see which ones work best for both you and for your audience. As a beginner YouTuber, do you think I should invest in an editor rather than editing myself? No! I'll explain. I am very much so on team learn how to edit yourself, and for a few reasons. For one, you'll learn what kind of editing you do and don't like. For two, you'll learn the basics and fundamentals to help you better communicate with your editor and know what to look for in an editor whenever the time to outsource comes. And the third reason is the most important, which is that you'll be able to develop your own style. If you start outsourcing right away, you won't know what your unique style is. You might know that you like the style of certain other creators, and your editors might be able to emulate that, but it will always only be a shadow of the originals. Plus, anything extra will always be based on the editor's own style, which will be the same across the different projects that they're working on. Let me tell you a story. Back when I started my first channel in 2021, I taught myself how to edit. I wasn't very good, but I learned quickly and I grew. Once my channel got monetized and I started bringing in some sponsorship money, I hired an editor. At first, it was great. It freed up a ton of my time and the quality of my videos shot way up. But the thing is, the quality of my videos then stayed at that level. Even as I grew as a creator and my own style evolved, and even with me requesting changes to my editors, they just couldn't see my vision. And so the quality stagnated. When I eventually took back my own editing, the quality of my videos first dropped because I am not a professional editor. But over time, my videos got better and better until they eventually surpassed the quality of my old outsourced videos. And it's not because I'm a better editor than the editor that I used to hire. They are much more skilled than I am. But it's because as I evolved, my editing style evolved too. My feedback loops were tighter. I could make a change and immediately see how it impacted the video. And over time, my style became my own. One day, I will hire an editor again. The difference is, it'll be after I know what my own style and creative voice is, so I can teach that to the editor. They'll still make more changes and the style will evolve, but the foundation of that style will be my own creative voice, not that of another. What software do you use to edit your videos? And does it matter? I currently use DaVinci Resolve, and for most people, it does not matter. Up until recently, so for the first 2.5 years of YouTube, I used an editing software that no one has ever heard of called HitFilm Express. I made my most viewed video ever in an editing software that no one has ever heard of. I only started using it because back when I started my first YouTube channel, I Googled best free editing software for beginners, and a random SEO article popped up that recommended using HitFilm. I will say I am definitely happier now with DaVinci though. Most YouTubers and editors now use either Final Cut Pro, Premiere Pro, or DaVinci Resolve. And while there are minute differences that professional editors will be able to notice, for 99% of us, any one of them is fine. I personally like using DaVinci Resolve because they have a free plan that absolutely rocks. And then I also use Figma to make all of my visuals, and I use Epidemic Sound for all my music and sound effects. I'll link all those in the video description. At this point, we've covered all of the individual elements that go into creating a killer YouTube video. Now we're going to transition into more advanced overall YouTube concepts, starting with everyone's favorite, Part 9, Analytics. Analytics is a topic that can get pretty deep and pretty complex, so to help me cover it, I've brought in Chris Galetta, an incredible strategist who's worked with Patty Galloway and who knows more about YouTube analytics than nearly anyone in the world. Getting Chris's input on anything is an absolute treat, so enjoy. What analytics do you find the most helpful, and what steps would you recommend based on those numbers?
So with YouTube Studio, I think if I could just look at two things in its entirety, I would get 80%, if not more, of the value that I would need. If I was a creator, I could look at just these two things and be totally fine. The other stuff is like, little hidden gems and nuggets here or there. But if you basically have the views graph, the homepage views graph that shows the blue line and the gray bar, and if you have your retention curve, that should serve 80% of anything you would possibly need out of YouTube. The reason for that is the retention curve, probably most obvious. Granted, sometimes it's hard to interpret, and so there's a question of putting in reps to understand how to read these things, but that's going to give you the most actionable feedback and understanding of your audience, of what they end up liking, don't liking, where did you lose people, where did you hold people really well, and yeah, what is overall resonating with them. And then the views graph itself will basically just tell you, was this video successful or not, as well as it's also aligning with the expectations that you go in with, such as if I publish a video that is very specifically for a smaller pocket of audience, I don't expect to see that shooting off or going crazy, but seeing it benchmarked against, how do videos typically do on my channel should be able to give me most everything that I would need to know. In terms of diagnosing a problem with a video, the way that I generally approach it, and where basically you can end up using these two things, is that the YouTube algorithm very simply could be broken down into sort of three aspects: is satisfaction, CTR or the click, and AVD, the watch time in aggregate. And so satisfaction is probably the thing that we have the least visibility into, but is something that for the most part shouldn't usually be a problem. And what's going to, if it is a problem, what you'll probably end up seeing is that your retention just plummets. At the beginning, people are just like clicking off of it, and like it's just not a very good video, so people didn't even have time to like be satisfied by it, or that maybe there is a higher amount of dislikes or something along that way. But satisfaction in general usually is kind of just like, okay, it's fine as is unless we see something egregious. Next, I look into the AVD, or the watch time as a whole, and judging, is this video, basically, does the AVD have more or less watch time than typical on my channels? And if it's less than normal, that is something that is important for the algorithm in some way, because it does weight watch time a bit heavier than, some of these attributes, where if you have a video, like taking a step back, when it comes to AVD and AVP percentage, AVD is the more important thing, barring that your retention isn't dog. If you have a video that is maybe only like 4 minutes long, comparing that to a video that's 30 minutes long, the 30-minute long one will generally probably have much more watch time, and overall, probably on average, if everything else is held the same, will end up performing better. But if your AVD looks fine and your retention looks fine, then that usually ends up meaning you have a CTR problem or a click problem, meaning it's a title, thumbnail, or topic. The reason that I don't start with CTR or even look at CTR is because CTR is a very muddled and muffled metric overall. The thing about CTR is that it's the thing in some ways which YouTube can control the most, because it can control who it sends an impression to. And you can kind of see this in an interesting way when you look across niches, where if you take, for instance, a gaming niche, gaming niches will tend to have very high CTR. And one of the things about that is that within gaming, let's take a game like Overwatch, for example. You either are into Overwatch or you're not into Overwatch. There's very little gray area. If we look at your YouTube watch history, I'm banking 99% sure that like you don't have an Overwatch video in the last 365 days or ever, right? But if we think about art, right? Art is something that across the board will tend to have a very low CTR shown in YouTube Studio. That doesn't, again, it's not a representation that like, oh, Overwatch thumbnails are more clickable than art thumbnails. What it is that if we look at both of our watch history, chances are you and I have at least one art video in our watch history in the last 365 days. So there's a lot more people out there that are maybe potentially interested in art. And so somebody saying like, oh yeah, I have a video with 12% CTR on like a very hyper niche game, doesn't mean really much anything to me as like an art channel that maybe has like an average of a 4% CTR across the channel, because art itself is going to behave fundamentally differently than other niches. But basically the best way to do it is like rule out everything else that we sort of know with more confidence. And if those things are good or sound in place, then you can probably say like, okay, this is the click problem, in which case I evaluate the title, the topic, or the thumbnail.
How do you read a retention graph? I ask this question just as much for me as for all of you, because those things can be really tricky to interpret. And I volunteered a video of my own to use as an example.
What's interesting when looking at videos, especially ones that have chapters, one of the first things that I look at, aside from the intro and, would want to look at your other retention graphs to benchmark how do we feel like this did overall. This here says that it's typical, which is good, but, we're always going to be hypercritical of intros and figuring out how to do those better, because that will usually indicate, again, what is possible for the rest of the curve. But then looking at the chapters, so each of these little dotted lines here represent chapters that you have in your videos. It can sometimes indicate where is their peak interest for people and what are segments that people really didn't find too much interest in. And you can think of your chapters as mini titles, giving that away. So like if we look here, we have like a large slopage that happens there and then there as well, and then like drop off. But what these little bumps usually represent when you have chapters is people skipping ahead to these areas to want to know like what this is about. And the fact that this section doesn't end up having any skips, and if anything there is a slight U shape to it, shows that people actually maybe didn't care that much about this section as compared to some of these other ones. So that's like a quick thought. So if we just look at like what these were, so this is 10, so the remarkability segment versus part 2 and part 3, right? Killer angle, killer format. And intuitively, it feels like that makes sense, right? Like these two, naming it part 1 and part 3, feel like, okay, yeah, these are like the essential bits of your formula of how to come up with it. The remarkability, just in the fact that it's absent of a part, feels like it's a bit more of a footnote, and maybe doesn't have as much of a purpose, versus also like killer format and killer angle gives you like the direct value proposition. So that's like one interesting thing of just like looking at this quickly, especially with chapters that I like to look at. The other bits is that we're looking for, one of the first things is we're looking for holds. So what are the sections that seem to be as flat as possible? Not even really with spikes. You can, look at spikes and they're definitely good to revisit, but like the first thing that I'm seeing is like, where do we have very nice holds? So from 1122 to looks like 1221 looks like it's probably one of the flattest parts of this video. So wanting to understand what were we talking about here in this section of remarkability. So like, again, maybe it was something that as advertised wasn't getting people to click because these are basically like mini titles, but of the people that were there watching it, maybe they ended up, really liking that segment. And so maybe there's something to take away from that. And then I would just like kind of comb through and see like what other flat parts. So like this looks like, again, like a little bit of a flat hold here after some drop off. So like maybe something interesting happened there, but then we can see these consistent patterns of like towards the end of segments, these drop offs. So there's a drop off, there's one, another one, another one. So like understanding how are we ending segments and tying it into the other thing. Does this mean that we sort of like made our point maybe 10 to 15 seconds earlier than the transition to the next segment is coming, and that we could have done like a smoother transition from the end of one into the next one, smoother or quicker, to help retain those people or keep them interested. And then the last bit would just be the fall off at the end, which I think knowing your content video and having watching this, like I think is expected, but also is fine, because I think these endpoints end up resonating really well with the people who end up like staying to the end and watching. And like a lot of people are always saying, cut off the end if you see this giant dip off and stuff. But it's like, again, it's about what is the purpose of that thing. Sometimes like we can be a little bit soulless, I think, in saying to cut out certain dips and things, because if we feel, so say for instance, right, we went from 15% to 12% here, so a 3% retention loss, but we had a total of 12% people, by the end. If for 12% of people, this last 30 seconds or minute was very impactful and meaning and like, moving for them and inspiring, why in the world would I want to cut that out to just placate, 3% here that was like dipping down? So I'm always trying to evaluate when we have dips, can we understand why they happened? And are we okay with them? Because sometimes it's, something that is core to you and your content that you want to keep in there that does cause a bit of a dip. And you just at least want to be aware of it and then actively be making a decision of like, but am I cool with this? Because I know that like my core viewer base and who I'm talking to really loves this aspect.
Yeah, that retention breakdown absolutely blew my mind. Chris is great. If you're interested in this sort of thing, I would highly recommend following him on Twitter, which I'll link in the video description. Part 10, audience connection and engagement. What are some ways to gain engaged fans rather than passive viewers? I want a high quality audience rather than a high quantity audience. I love this question. I came across some writing about this from a strategist called Wano, and I wanted to share his framework because I found it very helpful. Essentially, not all viewers are the same. There are blue viewers, which are viewers that have never seen your videos before. There are yellow viewers, which are viewers that have seen your content maybe once or twice before. There are orange viewers, which are viewers that will watch a video of yours if it's one that they're particularly interested in. And then there are red viewers, your ride or dies, your true fans. The problem with most standard YouTube advice is that they just focus on the blue viewers. There is this big focus on getting as many views as possible, on your videos blowing up and bringing in lots of viewers who have never seen your videos before. Getting views is obviously very important on YouTube, but not all views and not all viewers are the same. If you focus on making videos with the broadest appeal and getting the highest number of views every single time, all you're focusing on is bringing in blue viewers. And those blue viewers may never evolve into red viewers because you're not treating them properly. But different types of content can evolve a blue viewer into a red viewer over time. I'll give you a concrete example. I could make a video about how to make a killer YouTube intro, and anyone who wants to grow on YouTube would click, because anyone who wants to grow on YouTube would know that intros are important. Great, I'm getting lots of blue viewers. Then I can make a video about how to make a killer YouTube thumbnail. It will also bring in blue viewers, because anyone who wants to grow on YouTube will also want to learn how to make good thumbnails, even if they have no idea who I am. But it also gives the opportunity for the blue viewers from the intro video to turn into yellow viewers, because they would already know that they liked the intro video and the thumbnail video is similar, so they can click on the thumbnail video and thus become a returning viewer. After that, I can make a video covering the top tips or strategies I followed to grow from 0 to 50K subscribers on YouTube. Now, that video might draw in some blue viewers if there are people out there who wanted to learn how to grow from 0 to 50K subscribers. But because the packaging is more me-oriented, how I grew from 0 to 50K, it'll appeal more so to people who are already familiar with me. At that point, a yellow viewer who watched both my intro and thumbnail video might see that video, already be familiar with me, already know that they like the way that I convey information, and decide to click on that video. And that video will be a bit more personal, give me an opportunity to share more of my own personality. At that point, the yellow viewer will evolve. They've already watched 3 of my videos, and they're already quite familiar with me. And maybe they realize that they only like watching my deep dive videos, and they don't really like my me-centric videos. And so they become an orange viewer and only watch one type of the content that I make. And that's completely fine. I am okay with that. Not every single video has to be for every single viewer. Because some other people will watch that video and think, hey, this girl is awesome. I love her content and I can see a lot of myself in her. Or, hey, I can really learn a lot from this person and I really like the way that she thinks and breaks down information. And then they go on a binge and watch a lot more of my content. And for those types of people, I can make content like Q&As where I answer their questions, or behind the scenes where I share much more of my own YouTube journey. If someone doesn't know who I am, they probably would never click on a Q&A or a behind the scenes video. But for the people who already know me and like me, those videos have the opportunity to deepen my relationship with them, evolving them into red viewers, my true fans. By the way, if you're a red viewer of mine out there and you've made it this far in the video, leave a red square emoji in your comment so I can give you some love. I really appreciate you, and I'm so happy that you're here. And obviously, these progression of specific videos is very specific to me and my own niche. The blue viewer, yellow viewer, orange viewer, and red viewer videos are going to look different for everyone depending on their channels. But the concept of making sure that you're not ignoring your returning viewers in favor of just appealing to new viewers is something that pretty much everyone can apply. How would you work on improving viewer engagement? Oftentimes, you can just ask people to like, subscribe, and comment. For example, right now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and leave a thumbs up if you've been finding this video helpful. We'll talk a little bit more about how these actions affect a video algorithmically in the next section. And one of the best things that you can do for viewer engagement is also just ask for comments. For example, I could ask everyone right now to comment with the tip that's been most helpful to them thus far. Seriously. Do it. Or if you don't want to think, I will also accept a comment just saying Aprilyn is the best. But don't just stop with asking for comments, then go on and actually engage with the comments that you get. I'll be the first to admit that the YouTube comment system is not the most conducive for having long discussions or forming a super engaged community, but that doesn't mean that you should absolutely ignore it. Instead, reply to comments. Try to reply to every single comment that you get, especially at the early stages. And if that's too much for you, you can have a window, like you'll reply to every comment you receive within the first 3 hours of a video going live. Or you can ask people to include a certain emoji or phrase in your comment, and then do your best to reply to every comment with that certain emoji or phrase. Your viewers will love hearing from you. It's already incredible that they're taking the time out of their day to not only watch your video, but also comment on it. And one of the best ways to evolve a viewer into the next stage, whether that's yellow to orange or orange to red, is by replying to their comment. Oh, also, YouTube community posts are great. Seriously, they are so underused. I also have a Twitter account that I've grown, and the engagement on the YouTube community posts is so much better than on Twitter. I will say too that I think I just have the best viewers in the world. I mean, seriously, I feel like I lucked out so much in that department. Everyone is just so thoughtful and kind and smart, and I just think that I won the viewer lottery. Part 11, algorithm. The YouTube algorithm can seem like this big black box of mysteries, and sometimes it feels like all you can do is just pray to the algorithm gods to shine favorably down upon you. So to help clear things up, I've brought in Renee Ritchie, who is the official YouTube liaison and who works at YouTube to serve as an advocate for creators and help creators better understand how YouTube works. If there's anyone who can crack the YouTube algorithm for us, it's Renee. How does the YouTube algorithm work?
Yeah, I love that question because I've been a creator since 2008 and I've had all of these questions, and it's nice to be inside YouTube and able to sort of poke people to get the answers. And I think the first big thing that creators have to realize is that YouTube doesn't push videos for creators. We always think we make a video, we post it, and then YouTube takes it and pushes it in front of a bunch of people. And that's not at all how it works. That's the opposite of how it works. I mean, except for notifications. Notifications do go out to people who've subscribed and hit the bell. But what YouTube does is pull videos for viewers. So if you imagine you open up YouTube on your browser or you open up the YouTube app, and what it does is in that instant, it tries to figure out the most satisfying videos for you, videos that you would love to like click on and watch, hopefully to completion, and then maybe watch another video. So it's viewer-centric, the algorithm, not creator-centric. And the way it works, my favorite current explanation, it's very concise, it's from Todd Beaupre, our Senior Director of Growth and Discovery, is that it's almost like automated word of mouth. So if I go to see a movie and I love it, and I know that you love similar movies to me, and I tell you and two other friends who also like those kinds of movies to go watch it, and then you watch it and enjoy it, and you tell 3 or 4 other friends, and it just grows and grows from there, that's how the YouTube algorithm works. It puts the video, like when people pull the video, if they see that video, if they click on it, if they watch it, it says, oh, I know who enjoys this video. And then it tries to find other people with similar watch histories who haven't seen that video, and it tries it with them. And the more people that like it, the better YouTube understands the audience, and the more people it knows could enjoy that. And it just keeps going until people stop responding. Because at a certain point, almost everyone who's been offered the video multiple times will have either watched it or just decided to ignore it until it goes away. And then that sort of audience pocket is exhausted. But the algorithm doesn't give up. It'll keep sort of offering those videos if someone searches for it, someone links to it from social, if a news story comes that gets people interested in it, if another creator posts a video that's similar and it shows up and suggested and people like it, that helps it find these new pockets of audience to explore. So that's sometimes while you see videos like pop off once, but then like a while later pop off again, and then maybe a while later pop off again.
How can I optimize my video, if at all, to make it easier for the algorithm to find the right audience for my video?
People will worry about like keywords or hashtags or stuffing the description. There are things that can get pulled from like writing a good description. Having a good thumbnail and a good title are like most of it. Like just in terms of getting people to click on and watch the videos. But the videos have to be good. And there's no amount of like keywording or description hacking that you can do to make a video better. And I think like sometimes people will spend a day or 2 days like carefully researching keywords when that time would be so much better spent just like working on the content itself, because that's what's most important. The thumbnail, the title, and that the video delivers on the promise made by both of those things. And I think if you focus on that, if you just pick one thing you want to improve every video and work on improving that, get 1% better a day, like you'll get stratospherically better results than if you worry about like optimizations. It's audience psychology at the end of the day. So there are titles, like especially some channels have like title formulas that have been successful that they use over and over again. Like Real Engineering will do like the insane engineering of the SR-71 Blackbird, the insane engineering of the stealth fighter, and people love those titles. They do it over and over again. Mr. Beast will do I survived 50 hours or 7 days or something on a raft in a cave. Like, there are things that are successful and you can do over and over again. So like finding those things that really resonate with an audience, it's not so much that they're tricks or hacks or optimizations, it's just they're compelling. They pique interest. They promise like a great experience, great entertainment. So those sort of things are really worthwhile, but it's not what I would consider like a trick. It's just like good audience psychology.
What should you do if the algorithm isn't serving your videos to the right audience?
So I think there's two things. I think sometimes people look at suggested traffic and they see that the topics don't relate to what they're making, and then they panic and think that for some reason YouTube doesn't understand their audience. But again, YouTube for those systems is thinking about the viewer, not the creator. And if you go and click on one of my videos, you'll probably see my video in the main window, and then maybe 2 other videos of mine, and then maybe 2 videos on a similar topic to mine, and then maybe a few videos on topics that you watched before my video or a couple of days ago, because humans like multiple things. No one just very few people watch just one thing over and over again. Most people like a variety of formats. So when you see suggested traffic, that doesn't represent at all who YouTube thinks your audience is. That represents the viewer's interests. And I might watch like 2 basketball videos and then a carpentry video, and it doesn't mean that basketball people are watching your video. It just means people with multiple interests. One of their interests happens to be the topics that you make. For the other question, for demographics, again, YouTube follows the audience. It's very hard to say, no, don't watch those videos. We're going to exclude you from watching those videos. It just means the videos you're making are appealing to that audience. Now, your idea of your ideal audience might be different than that, but the content you're making is appealing to that audience. Otherwise, they wouldn't be watching, they wouldn't be retaining, they wouldn't be coming back. So I think that's an opportunity to look at the analytics and see, hey, why am I skewing this direction instead of the direction I want? And then maybe find some creators or watch some YouTube people who do appeal to that, see what they're doing differently. Maybe it's language, presentation, areas of focus, and talk to your creator friends, especially people who are hitting that demographic, because maybe they'll tell you, hey, yeah, if you're a tech creator and you want to appeal to women, it's very different. Like, you can't just be a woman talking about tech the same way a man does, because that's the same audience. You have to talk about things that in general, like, not to be overly generic, but in general, that appeals to women. And tech creators who do that, they get much bigger women audiences. So I would just say it's an opportunity to sort of troubleshoot what's going on there.
Why does YouTube stop giving me impressions, even when the video is performing well with a good CTR and a high AVD?
Yeah, I think one of the issues here is that statistics are really, really hard. And I went through all the same anxiety before I joined YouTube and started to really not just better understand YouTube, but better understand statistics. For example, is a high CTR and a high AVD good? Yes, but as a video goes viral, those numbers go down, not up. And people might see them and say, hey, why did my low metrics video do so much better? And it's just that, 3% of a million is so much more than 10% of 1,000, that the views are going up even if percentage of people, like the absolute number versus the percentage, I think is a little bit hard to understand. So when a video performs really well, especially when it goes viral, click-through rate and view duration actually go down, because there's just so many people getting eyes on that thumbnail that the quality of the match gets lower. Basically, 90% of the first group of people are a match, 80% of the second group of people, 70%, 50%, and it gets to a certain point where there's massive amounts of impressions, but the percentage is lower. But still, that means massive amount of views. So conversely, if your numbers are staying high, that typically means your most engaged audience, your super fans are loving it, they're insta-clicking on it. But when YouTube tries to go to a broader audience, they're just not interested. It may be too niche a topic, it may not be relevant to them, and so they stop clicking really fast. And that means that you don't really see a slow deceleration, you just see that sort of drop. So it's super fans, highly engaged, keeping that CTR and AVD real high, and then the much bigger, more massive mainstream audience is pass. And so the impressions just stop because there's nowhere to go once you've gotten through that super fan audience. And sometimes you'll see a video that's flat. The opposite is totally flat, and then it takes off, and you'll see oh, my core audience didn't like this at all, but YouTube found a massive mainstream audience that loves it, and both those numbers are going to be really low, but the video is going to perform super, super well. So that's, again, just the paradox of how statistics work.
How important are likes, subscribes, and comments, really?
So it's difficult to say like how important something is because the systems measure so many signals, like billions of signals, and the exact weighting of each signal can depend on a lot of things, like how important is a subscribe. Well, if it was recent, then it's probably pretty important because someone liked your video enough to hit that subscribe button. If they subscribed 10 years ago and haven't watched the channel in years, that they're subscribed is probably less important because they're way older and they might have different interests. Likes are a good signal of satisfaction. The algorithm doesn't really focus on raw watch time because you can have regrettable watch time. Like you can watch something that you don't like and it bums you out. So we really try to focus on satisfaction, and people liking the video is a good sign of satisfaction. We do try to figure out if someone would comment on a video. Like YouTube basically tries to predict how people will engage with a video when it makes those recommendations, and whether they'll comment or not is one of the factors that's considered. Same way whether they'd like it, whether they might subscribe to it, whether they might watch all of the video. But for example, whether you moderate comments or not, like whether you want to have every comment stay up, whether you want to remove comments that you think are toxic, that kind of stuff YouTube doesn't consider, because we would never want to sort of make a creator leave up comments or take away comments that it's not good. It's not what they want for themselves or their community. So we're careful on how we balance all these things as well.
So would you say it's still worth it for a creator in their video to maybe have like a call to action saying, if you like this, make sure to put a thumbs up, or like leave a comment saying this? Is that something that is helpful to them in the performance of their video?
I think you can do anything you want, and it depends on what your goal is. Like maybe you want to get subscribers because you want to get a feature unlocked, or you want to get a play button, or you need a certain amount of subscribers to get a certain brand deal. Like there's always going to be different reasons for people. But I think in general, you don't want to give people too many jobs, because if it feels like you're giving them a lot of jobs, they might just choose to do none of them. Like it's a lot of work at the end of the day. So if you were to say like, subscribe, go to my newsletter, go to my website, download my audiobook, like it just starts feeling like a job, and people are like, no, I just came here to be entertained. If you want to grow your channel, I think one of the best calls to action is just when you get to the end of the video, give them another thing to do, like another video to watch, because they're going to be bored at that point. They're going to want something else to do. And if you say, hey, if you love this video, here's a deeper dive, here's like a bigger picture, here's like part 2, like if you can give them that, they're going to maybe watch that other video. And when people start watching multiple videos, that's a really strong sign of satisfaction. If you get them binging and coming back to your channel, that's a really strong sign. So if growth is what you're after, I think less like, subscribe, comment, and more like, hey, watch this next video.
Part 12, flops. It's happened to us all. We pour a lot of work and effort into a video, we get really excited to release it, and when we do, it flops. What should you do next, and is there any way to save it? Let's talk about it. When do you consider a video a failure, and what factors do you consider when coming to that decision? First, in order to consider a video a failure, you have to first define what success is. And the thing is, a video doesn't need to get 1 million views in order to be successful. I like to establish 3 different categories of videos, each with their own definitions of success. There are banger videos, where the goal is to get as many views from new viewers as possible. There are also connection videos, where the goal is to connect with my audience on a deeper level, and perhaps convert some of the casual orange viewers into loyal red viewers. And then there are soul videos, where the goal is to purely give myself the opportunity to say something I want to say, or to stir up that creative spark. And even within those categories, there can be sub-goals as well. There can be the goal to learn and implement something new. If a video is sponsored, or if you have an offer of your own, the goal might be a certain number of conversions. Your goal might even be to get a certain type of comment. And I really do believe that establishing goals for certain videos is very important in not driving yourself insane. Because if we make a video with the intent of trying out something new, and then the video doesn't perform as well, and we view that as a failure, it's very easy to get discouraged and stop experimenting, or even just stop uploading on YouTube altogether. So first, I would get realistic into what your goals actually are on a video by video basis. But if your goal for a successful video is to get a certain number of views, and when you release it, it's a bit of a flop, it may not be completely over. And to talk more about this, I brought in Chris Galetta again, because if there's anyone who can do a data-driven postmortem of a video, it's Chris. When do you consider a video a failure, and what factors do you consider when coming to that decision?
Good question. Depends again on the context of the channel. For instance, a channel that is large enough usually has an easier time for YouTube knowing where their audience is, and so that video should be distributed pretty quickly. to the audience, and YouTube shouldn't have trouble, finding the audience. For a smaller channel, say someone that only gets like a couple hundred to a couple thousand views in the first few hours, that process can take quite a while, especially if they're maybe pivoting. So I'm going in originally with a mindset of understanding what is the channel's content, what is their normal 24-hour distribution or 1 week distribution, and then is this a piece of content that fits very cleanly and nicely into the channel, or is this something that is deviating a little bit into something that we would classify maybe as like a different niche, where I think like Ali Abdaal is actually an interesting example of this, of a channel that is pretty large, but because I feel like touches on like 3 big demographics of audiences, his videos actually can sometimes take a bit of a time to really pick up or take off in certain spheres, because he has a bit of a mix of content. So when you have a channel that pivots content constantly, that stuff can end up taking a little bit of time. So usually I'm a bit more patient. I'll usually never write something off until I see the retention curve, because that will also be an indicator to me of like, was this a failure because of the clickability, or was this a failure because of the watchability of it? And saying like, okay, cool, I got the topic right, I got the thumbnail and title packaging right, like I felt that was good, I just did not follow up on the content that well. And that's something that I could learn from. Or is this something that the retention looks really good and the AVD looks good, but it's just not getting the views, in which case it's like, cool, that was a swing and a miss possibly on the idea topic itself or the title and thumbnail, which might mean it's salvageable. Sometimes you can just like repackage something and it'll take off as long as the AVD and retention are still good on it. Usually means that it has gas left in the tank.
One thing I do want to add on here is that, look, everybody gets flops. If your goal is to avoid ever getting a flop, you're also going to avoid experimentation, which can dramatically decrease your pace of learning and improvement. Yes, we always try to make good videos, but if you make a video and it gets fewer views than expected, just know that it's normal. It happens to everyone. You're not alone. And the best thing you can do is just diagnose where things went wrong to learn for next time. How can you revive a dead video?
One of my favorite things to do is if they're, especially a video that's maybe old in the catalog, if you all of a sudden, sometime down the line, you just have an aha moment of like a type of thumbnail or title that would really work well for that, and you make the change. Sometimes I like to throw it in end screen from a video that is still getting traffic to try to give it a bit of a boost, or sometimes there's a way to create a short either from that content or related to that content that you can direct traffic to, but anything to like give it a little bit of a jump start can end up being a good way. But I think end screens are really valuable and useful tools for when you're making those catalog changes, seeing what can happen to it. And it doesn't even have to be much. It could just be a few days, even a few hours, depending again on the size of your channel.
So that was for like the older catalog video. What about like, when you first release it and maybe on the first day and didn't get the views that you wanted to? Should you go into like starting to make title and thumbnail changes immediately?
Yeah, I mean, especially now with thumbnail A/B testing, I think there's always a lot that can be learned from that, of what concepts are working, and like, is this like fundamentally changing the click pattern in any way? So like always having some concepts prepared for that. For the title, I would always have some backups, especially ones that can really try a unique or differentiated angle. So maybe you use a title that is like a proven title or format that like a lot of other channels and niches have done, but what you're not realizing is that this topic has been touched on so many times that there's now actually a bit of exhaustion, and like, if anything, maybe aversion to that title, but coming at it from a new angle could be something that is really unique, or just piques people's curiosity. One of the newest formats that I saw recently that I really liked is You Don't Understand XYZ. So you can think of like I saw for a Dragon Ball Z video something like You Don't Understand Gohan, but then after I saw that, it like struck me, it's like, wow, I really like that title. And then looking into other niches and stuff, saw that this title has had outlier success quite a few times, of like, You Don't Understand EQ, You Don't Understand GTA 5 story. And all of these things are fundamentally just a rewording and resmithing of the entire GTA story, from beginning to end. Let me tell you about EQ or something like that. But they're just using a different angle for the same exact topic.
How long would you wait to change the title and thumbnail of a video if it doesn't have a good CTR? I'd usually start out with a thumbnail A/B test right off the bat. Typically, I'd wait around 2 to 3 days before making any title changes. It's also worth considering what your typical view patterns are. For some channels, your videos might all take off around the 1 week mark, so I wouldn't make any changes until after that window has passed. The exception I'll say is if right off the bat the video flops. If, as soon as you had access to your analytics right after upload, the views and click-through rate are much lower than they normally are, something about your video isn't resonating with your core audience, and I'd make a packaging change as soon as possible. At what point do you stop trying to save a video by changing the title and thumbnail? I'd usually try for a couple of weeks. Afterwards, I'll either keep running it until I run out of variation ideas, or I'll set a limit for myself, like 1 change per week. It's pretty easy to drive yourself crazy, constantly monitoring the analytics and making 100 tiny changes, hoping that one of them will make a difference. So it can be quite effective to set a cooldown period for yourself after making each change to help you not go completely insane. If a video does not go well, is there any problem deleting it? I really wouldn't delete it unless it's a video that you really don't want other people seeing. For one, even if a video doesn't have a broad appeal and doesn't perform well, it doesn't mean that the people who do see it don't appreciate it. Some of the best comments I ever received came from videos that performed the worst for me, because even though the video didn't blow up, the people who did see it loved it and it had an impact on them. Additionally, even if a video doesn't do well at first, there's always the chance that it might get picked up later, either out of the blue or because a future video viewers taking off could affect it. That's what happened to these 2 videos of mine. When I first published them, they flattened out at around 1,000 views. But then later on, after my intro video started getting some traction, they took off and now have over 200,000 views each. I really wouldn't ever delete a video unless your video is getting a ton of negative feedback and you just don't want anyone to ever see it in the future. Part 13, business and sponsorships. How do YouTubers make money? I often get asked how I make money or how YouTubers in general make money, so let's break it down. There are 4 main ways YouTubers make money: AdSense, affiliate links, personal offerings or products, and sponsorships. Starting with AdSense, once your channel hits 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours, you can qualify to start earning money off of the ads that YouTube places on your videos. The money that you make is measured in something called RPM, or revenue per mil, which is the revenue that you make per 1,000 views of your videos. RPM also takes into account things like channel memberships and super thanks, but for the large majority of you, your RPM will be primarily driven by ads. This RPM is dependent on a lot of factors, including niche, geography, time of year, and much more. Different niches have different RPMs, and even different individual videos within those niches can have different RPMs. In general, RPMs are driven by how valuable an impression is to an advertiser. The more money an advertiser can make from an impression, the higher the RPM. As a result, niches like personal finance or business tend to have higher RPMs, while niches like personal vlogging tend to have lower RPMs. RPM is also driven by geography. Videos with primary audiences based in the US will have a higher RPM than videos with primary audiences based in India, for example. And RPM can also fluctuate with the overall ad market. In general, advertisers tend to have more money to spend at the end of the year when they're using the remainder of their budget, versus at the beginning of the year when they're a bit more frugal. As a result, we tend to see higher RPMs in the last quarter of the year and lower RPMs in the first quarter of the year. So that's AdSense. There's also affiliate links. When I mention a product and put the link in the video description, those links are often affiliate links. This means that if anyone buys the product through my link, I will get a small commission. The viewer will pay the exact same whether they use my affiliate link or not, but I will get a small reward if they do use my link. For instance, I mentioned a tool called Gling in this video. It's a tool that I regularly use, and I also have an affiliate link. A subscription to Gling is $10 a month, and if someone purchases it through my link, I get $2 a month. I know it doesn't sound like much, but over time it can really start to add up. And as a hot tip, affiliate links from software products with a recurring membership can be better in the long term than affiliate links from one-off products, because then you get that monthly recurring affiliate revenue for as long as that person is subscribed to that software product. And in a world where income fluctuates a lot from month to month as a creator, having that monthly recurring revenue can be huge. Next up, we have personal products and offerings. There are a lot of different types of products or offerings that a creator can offer to their viewer. A classic example is courses. If you're a YouTuber with a personal finance channel, you can make a course about personal finance and offer that to your viewers. YouTubers also tend to offer things like consulting, memberships like Patreon, books, digital downloads, and even physical products. When offering products of your own, the biggest thing to keep in mind is trust. The most valuable asset you have on YouTube is not views, not revenue, but trust. If the trust is broken, everything else fails. I've seen some YouTubers lean so far into their paid offerings that it feels like every video they make is just a long infomercial for their course, and it ends up leaving a poor taste in your mouth. No one likes to be sold or shilled to. I'm not saying that you shouldn't offer products. In fact, it's one of the absolute best things that you can do for your YouTube business, as it helps create revenue that's a bit separate from the views that you get, which can lead to a much healthier relationship with YouTube. But if you do make a product, it's very important to consider who the product is for, why they would buy it, and how you can talk about it in a way that does not erode trust. And finally, we have sponsorships. Besides personal products and offerings, sponsorships are usually one of the biggest sources of income for creators. In its most basic form, sponsorships involve working with a brand to market or advertise their product or service, usually through the form of talking about their product or service in a video of yours. I get a lot of questions about sponsorships, so to help answer them, I figured I would bring in Justin Moore, who is an absolute wizard when it comes to everything related to brand deals. Justin has helped creators land a total of over $5 million worth of sponsorships, and today is here to make sure that you're not leaving money on the table. When should you start looking for or accepting sponsorships?
A lot of creators ask me, when is the right time to start looking for or accepting sponsorships, right? Is it 10,000 subscribers? Is it 100K? Maybe more than that? And the real answer is that there is no threshold. Maybe one brand one time told you like, oh, we only work with creators who have 10,000 subscribers. And so you thought, oh, I guess every brand is that way. But that's not the case at all, especially if you have a very specific niche that might be valuable to certain brands. So the way that I think about this is that in the beginning, when you were just starting out, and let's say you have 1,000 subscribers, right? If you were to reach out to a brand and say, hey, let me talk about you in integration on my YouTube channel, and you get, let's say, hundreds of views on average, that's likely not going to move the needle for them. Let's just be real here, right? And so instead, let's say that you did an audit of their overall social presence, right? You look at their social media and they're not posting super regularly, or they don't have a YouTube channel, or they don't have a podcast, or they don't have a TikTok page, or their blog is dormant, right? And you can reach out to them and say, hey, look, I can actually create some content, some videos for you on autopilot that you can use and repurpose on your social media brand or your website or use for paid advertising. And oh, by the way, go take a look at my YouTube channel because that is my portfolio. Right? And so the beautiful thing about this reframing is that the amount of money that you can charge is completely detached from how many views or subscribers you have, right? And so what you pitch has to change in the beginning. So that's at the very beginning when you don't have a ton of influence or a ton of experience or anything like that, right? And let's say you grow now. Let's say that you're getting thousands of views on average now, right? Okay, well maybe what you pitch is a combination of content for the brand to use, maybe there's some consulting in there, and maybe, yeah, syndicating or amplifying that content on your platform starts becoming meaningful, right? So it's a hybrid pitch. Now let's say you achieve some serious scale, right? You're getting tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of views on your videos. Yeah, the thrust of your pitch can now become, hey, I'm gonna do an integration on my YouTube channel in a video. That's gonna become very, very meaningful for you, right? And so this is what I call the sponsorship continuum, and it's very liberating for a lot of creators because they realize, wow, it's not about how many views I'm getting or how many minimum subscribers I have. It's about how can I serve the brand at different stages of my journey.
How much money should you charge for a sponsorship?
Probably the number one question that I get from creators is, how much should I charge for one YouTube integration or a dedicated video? I've got a brand asking me, right? I don't know what to charge. And so the first thing I'll say, it is very much an art and a science, but I do have some frameworks for you that I teach in my Brand Deal Wizard course. And so the first one is called the ARC framework. And the second one is called the DUE rule, D-U-E, okay? And so the first cautionary piece of advice that I want to give is that I know that there's a lot of calculators that exist out there on the internet, but they're all trash. And the main reason is that they are only evaluating your rate based on your metrics on YouTube or on social media, right? So they ingest your channel, they do some calculations, and they say, okay, based on how many views you get and how many subscribers and your engagement rate and all that stuff, and then they spit out a number. And in my opinion, those calculators are not accurate because you are missing the other 50% of the equation, which is the brand's objectives. And so this is where the ARC framework comes into play. And so when a brand decides that they want to run a campaign with a creator, they will 100% of the time always have one of these three objectives in mind, or two of them, or all three. A is awareness, right? So the primary reason the brand wants to hire you is to spread the word, right? Maybe they've got a new product launch, or they're launching in a new territory. They were available only in the UK and now they're in the US, right? So they want to spread the word about that. The R is repurposing. So the primary reason the brand wants to hire you is to take the content that you generate and publish on your YouTube channel and use it in other ways, maybe on their YouTube channel, on their social media, on their blog for paid advertising and so on. And the C in the ARC framework is conversion. Yeah, so the main reason the brand wants to hire you is drive sales, right? Drive, trial signups for their software program, app downloads, something like that. So something very attributable and measurable. And the reason that you need to ascertain what the brand's objectives are is that your pricing has to change. Let me explain by working backwards. So in a conversion-focused campaign, the contact that you're negotiating with, they have this math, this napkin math for what's called CPA, what's called cost per acquisition metrics, right? So they know that, okay, if we're going to pay, Justin, let's say $5K, here's how the math has to work out for us. So we know, let's say he gets 10,000 views on average, okay? And we know that we're, conservatively assuming that, let's say 10% of the people who watch this video are going to click on the link in the YouTube description box, right? That's 1,000 people, okay? Of the 1,000 people that click on that link, let's say that 25% of the people sign up for a free trial. So that's 250 people, right? Of the 250 people that sign up for a free trial, let's say 20% of those are going to convert into a paying plan. So that's 50 people, right? Okay, so we've got 50 people that converted from that, right? And we know that let's say our software program is $10 a month. And we know on average that people stick around for the retention rate before they churn is 10 months, right? So the lifetime value, the average lifetime value of our customers is $100, okay? And if we're able to acquire 50 customers from that partnership with Justin, that's 50 times 100, that's the max they're gonna pay me, is that $5,000, right? And by the way, they don't just want to break even. That's the break even point. They want to turn a profit. That's the entire reason that they're doing influencer marketing, right? And so in reality, they're going to want to pay you a fraction of that. 50%, 25% of that, maybe lower. It depends on their risk tolerance, right? And so this is the reason in these scenarios where a brand has a conversion-focused metric or success metric, that's why it's so hard to negotiate with them, because they have this math that, they've got their boss breathing down their neck and saying, okay, hey, we can't exceed this number. Okay, contrast that with an awareness-focused campaign. What are the success metrics in that scenario, right? It's eyeballs, impressions, comments, engagement, right? Did we spread the word? Hopefully, right? And so what I like to say is that the metrics are squishier, right? That person doesn't have their boss breathing down their neck and saying, hey, how many sales did we drive with that campaign with Justin? Right? And so your negotiating leverage in an awareness-focused campaign is stratospherically higher than a conversion one. And so this is the ARC framework and why it's so critical that you understand that. The second part is the DO rule, right? DUE. And so this is where you have to scope the deal, the deliverables, right? That's what the D is, hey, how many videos do they want you to make? Is it integrated? Is it dedicated, right? That's a very critical piece of this. Do they want you to amplify this on social media, Instagram, TikTok, etc.? Do they want you to do a sponsored community post on YouTube? The U in the do rule is usage rights. So does the brand want to take your content and use it in other ways, right? Maybe for paid advertising, that's something you should charge them for. And for how long do they want to do that? And the E in the do rule is exclusivity, okay? And this is, hey, are they saying that you cannot work with their competitors in a certain category for a certain duration? That represents actual money out of your pocket. We're one of their competitors to come to you 3, 4, 6 months down the line and say, hey, we'd love to, here's a giant bag with a money symbol on it. You're saying, can't do it. I agreed to exclusivity a year ago or something like that. Quick anecdote, I know a creator that agreed to 5 years of exclusivity for a free mattress. A free mattress. Okay, so don't be that person. So at the end of the day, like I mentioned, it's an art and a science, but you really need to learn this stuff because it can have a profound impact on your pricing.
How can you tell if you're dealing with a real brand or a scammer?
One fear that a lot of creators have is when they get an email inquiry from a brand, is this a legit brand or is it a scammer? Because this is it's actually a real concern. Creators have had their channels hacked through kind of these fake brand deals. And so there's a couple simple steps that you can take to protect yourself. So the first is looking at the domain of the sender, right? And so oftentimes if it's coming from a Gmail or op.pl or some of these random domains that don't really look legitimate, that's a real quick and easy way to determine that, hey, this is probably not a legitimate brand deal. The challenge is that sometimes the domain might look legitimate. So it says like Nike-PR-team.com or something like that. So, some scammers will actually go out of their way to buy domains that seem like they're from a legitimate brand, but when in reality, if you do a little bit of digging, you'll actually see that, oh, the brand actually doesn't control that domain. They would never have a domain like that. In reality, it would be coming from Nike.com or something like that. The thing that makes this a bit murkier is that oftentimes larger brands will hire outside advertising agencies to facilitate these types of influencer marketing campaigns on their behalf. So you may sometimes have emails that come from an agency that is like Edelman or Ketchum or some of these smaller influencer marketing agencies or something like that. And so it can be a little tricky, but looking at the domain should be the first thing that you do. The second tip I have is looking at the email signatory. And so if they are signing it off like Nike marketing team, and there's no one's name there, like first and last name and their phone number and their email address, things like that, a brand will almost never reach out to you without identifying themselves, like it's an actual influencer marketing manager or maybe account coordinator at the agency or something like that. So that's another red flag. And the third red flag is that if they're asking you to download an attachment that is like an executable file and download something onto your computer to view the contract, that is almost always a sign that they're trying to gain access to your passwords, your social media accounts, your YouTube channel, and things like that. So never, ever, ever do something like that.
What advice would you give to someone looking for and executing on their first sponsorship?
If you're a creator working on your first sponsorship, I have a quick piece of advice that's going to be a game changer. Be responsive. Be communicative. I ran an influencer marketing agency for about 7 years, and this was the number one challenge for us, is we would execute a deal with a creator, and then we would follow up with them and say, hey, we need a clarification on something small, or hey, can you make a quick edit or very small voiceover change to this integration that you did? And it would take us 2, 3, 4, 5 days to hear back from them, following up over and over. What you have to remember is that the brand is likely not just working with you on this campaign. They're working with 5, 10, 15, 20 other creators. And so if you're the person that is a huge pain in the butt to hear back from on these very simple clarifying points, do you think the brand or that agency is going to want to hire you again? Likely not, because it's like pulling teeth to get every piece, every aspect of the campaign from you. And so if you can be the person that's on it and you're responding within just a few hours, the brand is going to notice that and probably want to renew with you.
What are the biggest sponsorship mistakes you see people make?
The biggest sponsorship mistake that I see creators making is working with the brand once and then literally never talking to them again. I made this mistake early on, 15 years ago when we started out as creators as well, because I get it. It's scary actually reaching out to the brand and saying, hey, how did the campaign go? Because what if the brand says, actually, it went really poorly. We hate you. Never talk to us again. That's what we think in our head the brand is going to say. When in reality, do you realize how much easier it is to convince a brand that you just worked with to hire you again? Especially if you just did good work for them. In reality, the brand is probably not going to say they hated you. The brand is either going to say, hey, it went great, and then perfect. Now is your chance to pitch them on the next campaign idea. Or they're going to say, well, you know what, it was okay, it went average. And so now is your opportunity to say to them, hey, well, I'm so glad, it's so useful to have that feedback from you. Let me think about this and do some analysis on my own to think about why that might be. And then you can come back to them and say, here is the 4 reasons that I think that this campaign, performed, suboptimally. And here is what I think we can do to address that in the next campaign. This is something that I call the post-campaign report. And this is something I teach in my Brand Deal Wizard course. And so it's an absolute game changer when you can go back to the brand with this type of feedback, because no creators Do this.
I feel so lucky that Justin was able to come on this video and share his advice. And if you want to hear more brand deal advice from him, he has a free weekly newsletter and an incredible course, both of which I will link in the video description. Is YouTube your full-time job? I'd love insight into the business side of things for you. Yes, I am lucky enough to call YouTube my full-time job. For me, the exact revenue breakdown varies significantly from month to month, but on average, it looks like this: 10% AdSense, 5% affiliate links, 20% course sales, 30% consulting, 10% speaking, and 25% sponsorships. My next video will be a full breakdown detailing exactly how much money I've made so far on YouTube, complete with all the numbers. So if that's something you're interested in seeing, now would be a great time to, well, you know the rest. But I will say that for me, everything, including sponsorships, consulting, speaker requests, everything, so far has been inbound, meaning that they reach out to me first as opposed to me reaching out to them. Part of that reason is that for me, making money has not been my number one priority. Right now, I'm more so focused on making enough money to pay the bills and then pouring all of my energy into making the best videos I can for you guys, as opposed to optimizing everything for making as much money as possible. That being said, I could definitely be doing a better job. For instance, I can guarantee that probably 99.9% of you had no idea that I have a course because I don't talk about it. You may have seen the link to it in my video description, and if you follow me on Twitter, you may have seen it in my bio, but that's about it. And the reason for that is mostly because I don't want to annoy you, and I would never want to pressure someone into buying something that they didn't need or want to buy. But I have received emails from people saying that they have had to literally Google me in order to find my course, so maybe I could be doing a better job at that. We'll see. I am also launching the pilot of a brand new offer, which is something that I'm simultaneously incredibly nervous about and also very excited for, because it's something that I've been thinking about for a very long time. I'll talk more about that in the next section, but that's my own breakdown of income. Part 14, finding your YouTube friends and community. How do you find really good YouTube friends or creator community? So something that has come up again and again in my conversations with other YouTubers and strategists is the concept of YouTube friends.
I think something that really helped me accelerate my channel is when I created a group of other YouTubers who are in the same niche, and we just have these weekly calls. We review thumbnails, we talk about titles, we watch each other's intros, give feedback on what we think could be better, could be changed. Sometimes we take the feedback we get, sometimes we don't. But the whole idea is getting other eyes on it. Not only do you get the feedback from them, but you giving feedback also helps you become a better creator. So we're all getting better 4 times as fast because we're looking at 4 times the amount of videos.
It's something that everyone seems to have in common. A community or group of friends that they're able to jam on titles and thumbnails with, get video feedback from, and overall just learn and grow with. Over the last year, I have been lucky enough to build up my own circle of YouTube friends, and I can honestly tell you that has been one of, if not the single most impactful part of my YouTube journey. But I remember what it was like when I knew literally not a single other soul who did YouTube, and how incredibly hard that was. So I want to break down how I found my YouTube friends and how I structure my YouTube group so that you can do the same. When it came to finding YouTube friends, there were 4 main ways that happened to me: introductions, cold outreach, communities, and conferences. One of my now closest YouTube friends was introduced to me by a mutual friend. She knew that I did YouTube, and she had a friend of hers who had just quit her job to go full-time onto YouTube, so she introduced us. We hopped on a phone call and instantly hit it off. We both had backgrounds in tech, we're both incredibly type A, and most importantly, we both shared the same attitude and level of commitment around YouTube. What we did not have, and this is important, is a shared niche. I make educational YouTube content while she makes entertaining Japanese culture adjacent vlogs and challenges. And I highlight this because I see so many creators out there who think that they have to find YouTube friends who do the exact same thing that they do. And at least for me, that was not true at all. What's most important in a YouTube friend is a shared level of commitment and attitude around YouTube. If one person treats YouTube solely as a business, while the other person treats YouTube solely as a hobby, it can lead to frustration and feeling like the other person just isn't getting it. The closer to your own niche you get, the more relatable your specific niche-related problems are. But there also is a huge benefit in talking to people outside of your niche, because they do bring in an outside perspective and skills. So my first serious YouTube friend was through an introduction. Convenient for me, but not easily replicable for others. Which brings us to cold outreach. Another YouTube friend of mine just reached out to me via Twitter DMs one day. She'd been following my journey both on Twitter and on YouTube, and she also had a YouTube channel. So we chatted and we hit it off. Cold outreach is also how Aristotle met one of his closest YouTube friends.
Like I cold emailed a guy. I watched his video and I was like, hey, this is awesome. So I sent him a cold email saying like, hey, I'd either love to do a collab with you or just hop on call and talk to you. And now he's one of my closest YouTube friends, and I've met him in real life twice, and we talk every week. And it's like, you never know unless you try.
The downside of cold outreach is that the hit rate or success rate tends to be pretty low, which is why I highly recommend online communities. I met a good number of my YouTube friends in online communities for YouTube. Specifically for me, it was in an old cohort-based version of the Part-Time YouTuber Academy from Ali Abdaal and from something called Creator Now. Online communities can be a great place to find YouTube friends because they are large gatherings of YouTubers who have all shown some significant level of commitment to improving on YouTube, and many of which are actively looking for more friendships. And finally, I've met a lot of YouTube friends at in-person conferences like Vid Summit and VidCon. Usually these friendships bloom because we're already in each other's orbits on Twitter, and then we see each other in person and get into talking, but I've also met plenty of friends that I did not know at the time of the conference. So that's how I found most of my YouTube friends. And while most of them I just have open message threads with, my closest YouTube friends meet weekly in something called a mastermind. Essentially, a small group of us meet weekly for 2 hours, and we each bring something to the meeting that we want feedback on. It can be things like a title and a thumbnail, or an intro or an edit, or even larger scale things like a new content strategy or a new storytelling framework. And each week in our mastermind, we give each other our thoughts and feedback. The first half of the calls are dedicated to items that are more tangible, like specific pieces of feedback, while the second half is more open for bigger conversations like quality versus quantity or a mindset shift. Our masterminds often will involve some element of creator therapy because, let's face it, this YouTube thing can get pretty hard sometimes. And when I tell you that this group has accelerated my rate of growth and improvement like nothing else, I am not exaggerating in the slightest. The quality of my videos have significantly improved. And when I'm hit with things that normally would have brought me down for a long time or even may have made me quit YouTube altogether, the group helps pick me back up. If there's anything that you get out of this mega video, it is to find YouTube friends and to start a small group. Speaking of YouTube friends and small groups, I am launching a more community-based and personal offering of my own. It's something that I'm quite a bit nervous for, but also very excited about, because it's something I've been thinking about for a very long time. So if that sounds like something that you'd be into, I'm going to leave a link in the video description where you can go to learn more and be notified of the launch. I really hope that I can create something for you that is just as impactful as what I've experienced in my own YouTube journey. Because man, oh man, this whole YouTube thing is so much harder to do alone. Part 15, mindset. How do you not give up and stay motivated even when you invest so much effort and see no results? This is a question that I get very often. My biggest piece of advice is to focus on process and input instead of outcome and results. And I know that that's something that's much easier said than done, but ultimately, not everything is within our control. You can make a great video and maybe no one will see it. Or maybe you'll make what you think is a great video, and then a year later look back on it and realize that it was actually not a great video, but you just didn't know enough to know it yet. Video flops are a part of the process. Every single person that I know, myself included, has had videos where they've poured so much energy and effort into, only to release it and not get the result that they wanted. But if you enjoy the process, it makes everything a lot easier. If you can get into a place where you can look at a video and say, man, I am proud of this video, and have that be enough of a motivator for you to continue, that's the place that you want to be. The motivation to keep going should be something that's mostly internal, not external. And I know that that's really hard because as creators, one of the greatest joys that we experience is when other people view and appreciate our work. But if you base too much of your motivation on something that's outside of your control, like views, that's not going to be sustainable in the long term. I do think it's still important to set goals though, because without goals, you can have no sense of progress and can feel like nothing is happening, which in and of itself is very demotivating. So instead, I would focus on setting goals on things that you can control. Goals like implementing a new storytelling framework, or trying out a new editing technique, or coming up with 10 thumbnail variations, or spending 1 hour per week on ideation. When you do that, you'll feel yourself progressing. You'll feel some sort of momentum, and that will keep you motivated. I would also focus on the comments and positive feedback that you do get. On YouTube, we deal with these crazy large numbers. We see other people getting hundreds of thousands or millions of views. And that is ridiculous to contextualize. I don't know what millions or hundreds of thousands of people look like. I know what 50 people look like. Look at your comments and screenshot the positive ones to look back on days when things get rough, and on days when you question whether or not it's all worth it. And as I mentioned in the last section, I would highly recommend getting together a small group of YouTube friends to help each other and support each other and to pull each other through those hard moments. I would also try to celebrate your wins when they do come. Those wins could be a specific subscriber or view count, but the wins could also be sticking to your upload schedule for 3 months, or getting a comment that you really wanted to get, or uploading your best video yet. Another thing that you can try, if you can, is to always have a queue of a few video ideas that you are really excited about. That way, if a video underperforms, you already have the next idea that you really look forward to making. And finally, do your best to keep the process fun, which is much easier said than done, so let's talk about it. How can you make and keep YouTube fun? It's really, really easy for YouTube to become not fun. And for me, YouTube becomes not fun when there's a layer of pressure or worry over it all. This pressure or worry can happen in a variety of ways. For one, if I place too much pressure on a single video to succeed. In those cases, making that single video becomes really, really hard. Or if I give myself far too much work to complete in a short period of time. That period of time then becomes very, very stressful. YouTube also gets not fun for me when I'm far too concerned about what the audience might think. And when I get so scared of potentially having a lower number of views or worse feedback that I stop myself from making the types of videos that I actually want to make. So to keep YouTube fun, I try my best to do the opposite of those things. Instead of putting everything that I have into one video, which puts a lot of pressure onto that one video, I'm going to start making a higher number of slightly lower lift videos. On second thought, this particular video might not be the best example of that. Instead of assigning myself too much work, I'm going to be reasonable and learn how much I'm actually able to do and adjust my workload from there. And instead of obsessing over potentially getting fewer views, I'm going to focus on making videos that I'm excited about and that I know that other people will also be excited about, even if it's not the most broadly appealing idea in the world. Dr. K, the creator therapist, has said that creator burnout comes from making decisions based on trying to avoid potential negative outcomes, as opposed to making decisions based off of what actually lights you up. So for me, sometimes keeping YouTube fun is about turning off that logical part of the brain, instead following the feeling, that spark and that creativity. Which I know was a strange thing to say after an hours-long video about the most logical things that you can do to grow on YouTube, but everything is about balance, right? I am ridiculously type A. So a big part of keeping YouTube fun for me is battling my perfectionism and my urge to optimize everything to death, which I haven't exactly figured out yet. The original intent for this video was to be a chill 30-minute Q&A, and we all know how that went. But also, when I look at my favorite creators, I don't love their videos because they're perfect. I love their videos because they're unique, because I can get a sense of their quirks and personality. I'm going to keep experimenting, and I encourage all of you to do so too. And I will say that a big part of giving yourself the freedom to experiment is establishing income sources that are not solely dependent on views. That's the reason why you see creators offering things like Patreon or courses or consulting, because it gives them a way to bring in money that's a bit separate from video views. Because yes, if every single cent you make is purely dependent on how many views you get, of course it's going to be harder to let go a little bit and keep YouTube fun. That goes back to pressure. The more pressure you can take off of every individual video that you make, the healthier relationship you're going to have with YouTube. How do I stop the fear that I'll never succeed on YouTube? Look, if you've made it this far in this gigantic video, if you've watched and paid attention to this entire thing, you are going to succeed on YouTube. Because what you've demonstrated is commitment. Commitment to learning and growing and improving, and commitment to take your YouTube journey seriously enough to watch an hours-long video on YouTube growth. Because ultimately, that's all success on YouTube boils down into. It's not about being the best editor or the best storyteller or the funniest person. It's about a willingness to learn, even if it's easier to not. The tenacity to keep going, even if it's easier to give up. And the desire to keep getting better, even when it's easier to stay still. As long as you have those traits, which you've already demonstrated by watching this video, it is impossible to fail. You're going to succeed on YouTube. It's just a matter of time. We've covered a lot in this video, and I just want to take a second to leave you with some final tips. First, this video is a resource to you. Feel free to come back to it as needed, but don't feel the need to apply everything all at once. This whole YouTube thing is a marathon, not a sprint. Don't let it overwhelm you. Instead, embrace what you've learned today and try to apply just one thing to every new video that you make. Don't be discouraged by initial setbacks because it literally happens to everyone. Remember that every successful YouTuber started where you are now. Keep refining your skills, stay consistent, and focus on providing value to your audience while following your own excitement. If you do this, growth will follow. Check out the video description for any of the resources or links that I mentioned in this video. Keep creating, and I will see you in the next video.